New Year, everybody, and welcome. I call to order the meeting of Arlington Heights School District 25 on this first board meeting of 2023. It is 7 p.m. on January 10th. And I will ask Lana to please call the roll.
Member Conley?
Here.
Member Olenichuk?
Here.
Member Cherniglia?
Here.
Member Jogi?
Here.
Member Scapalato?
Here.
Member Philippek?
Here.
Member Faso?
Here. Thank you, Lana. The board loves having a full house, so we're so excited you're all here today. And we're going to be starting with recognitions and presentations, recognizing our Arlington Heights All-Star Student Athletes, and which truly the board is so excited to congratulate the Arlington Heights All-Star athletes on their participation in the Special Olympics basketball skills competition. And you know, we're so sad because it's the first meeting of the year. My friend Brian here just reminded me we could have all worn our very cool blue t-shirts and we forgot. So we will have to make it up to our All-Stars and wear it at another board meeting. But we're so excited, and I will give it to Dr. Bine.
Thank you. Before we call out individual names, do we have coaches or anyone that wants to speak about the basketball skills season? Not? Okay, I will do it. No, then you're good. I just want to make sure I didn't miss you. Many of us were able to go to the basketball skills competition, and we're very impressed with not only how hard everybody had practiced, but really how much our All-Stars congratulated each other, congratulated other opponents. That really, being a good team member and a good sport, was really something that made me very proud to be your superintendent and to tell people in the audience, that's my team, that's my school district. So when we call your name, if you'd like to go up and hand out, when we call your name, if you would come up, and Dr. Jogi, our board president, will meet you at the front desk, and we can all applaud for you, and she has a small token of appreciation from the board. So if you are here, Dean Bordick, come up, please. Dean? Aiden Bowers. Is Aiden here? Adam Bazinski. Is Adam here today? Okay, we'll make sure they get these. Grace Kennedy. Is Grace here today? JT D'Angelo. Is JT here tonight? Okay. Lily Franchi. Is Lily here today? I need to connect with Lily and learn to shoot baskets from her. Andrew Huang. Is Andrew here today? Devin Jetla. Is Devin here today? Oh, lots of people sleeping. Eliza Kim. Is Eliza here today? Okay. Grace Padota. Is Grace Padota here today? Leah Perez. Leah Perez here today? Ava Revlis. Is Ava here today? Aoi Sasani? Giuseppe Scaraval? Giuseppe? Brady Simpson. Is Brady here today? Regan Stalin. Is Regan here? Coaches, did I miss any students who are present that you see? Okay, then I'd also like to applaud for our coaches and have them come up as well. Allison Keogh. Colleen Higgins. Kristen Baker. Megan Gamber. Carol Galimo. Abby Grow. Beth Johnson. Carol Nelms. Mary Rogala. Annie Taylor. And Hannah Tyke. Woo! There's one. Brian, you gotta give it back. You gotta bring it back. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, parents, coaches, athletes. What an impressive group of people. Coaches, we'd ask you to take the rest of the squishy balls back for the other students, if you would. And again, just thank you so much, and congratulations, All-Stars. We're very proud of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and we're really excited to see the video that we have, right?
Do we have a video?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
There it is.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah, please come on up.
On behalf of the team, we have a little gift. The bigger one's in the mail, it's snail mail, but it just sums up the day with a little pig collage.
Oh,
But thanks for coming, so
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
That's so nice.
we appreciate all the support for the team. Thank you.
No, of course, and you have, this team has really truly inspired us to shine bright like all-stars. So thank you so much, and you feel free to stay, or if you'd like to go and enjoy the evening, and feel free to go as well.
Congratulations. I'm going to start this down at Chad so you can pass it down.
Okay, after that highlight, we will continue with board communications. My colleagues have any updates to begin with? Starting the new year. A really quick update. We ended the year as a board. We toured our school buildings, and it was great to kind of see all our students really excited and happy and working and so focused. So that was really great for our board to be able to be in the school buildings, touring our buildings. So thank you to the principals and the educators and the students for welcoming the board and kind of showing us all their great work. Moving forward, we'll go on to Ed Red. Rich or Stacy, do you have any updates for us?
Yes, I do have a couple updates. Maybe the easiest one is that Ed Red will have their annual dinner on the 23rd, Monday the 23rd. If you haven't already signed up, please sign up. But I wanted to go over some other, as I pointed out last time, there was always a lot of activity near the end of the year, things of that nature that would probably have some bearing on everything. And so the comments I'm going to be, or the areas that I'm going to talk about, I'm not passing judgment on any of them, just giving you the facts. On the 6th of January, you'll be happy to know that Illinois passed, Governor Pritzker passed his 39th proclamation that we are still in a emergency situation due to COVID. It's interesting to note that, and these are just facts, we've been in an emergency proclamation for 70% of his tenure, and the powers are really meant for emergency situations that skirt lawmakers, approval that have become a routine. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has lifted all COVID-19 restrictions in August, saying there's no longer recommending quarantining if exposed to someone who tests positive. And then it was interesting to note that other states, Arizona, Florida, Louisiana, New Hampshire, and Virginia, have all enacted have laws to limit emergency powers because of that. And the reason I'm bringing it up, obviously, it is impacts to recent laws that talk about teacher impacts when they're impacted by COVID. As long as there's an Emergency Powers Act, there is an impact on their leave. So that's one of an interesting impact to us. The other thing, and just in a general comment, President Biden did pass the $1.7 trillion government funding package, but there was a little provision within there, which is kind of impactful to general society, is the ability as a new tax maybe process, right? If those of you who have a 529 plan, and that's your educating plan, meaning funds that you could put aside for vocational, for K through 12 education, for higher education, as long as you identify beneficiary, you do now have a ability to move those funds from your 529 plan over to a individual 401k based on what was just passed. There are a couple caveats. It's a $35,000 lifetime cap on those particular transfers. The rollovers are subject to the annual Roth IRA contribution limit, so you can only really do about $5,000 at a time. It can only be made to the beneficiary, so you can't make it back to yourself. You can make it to a beneficiary, so that's an interesting component of it. The other interesting component was the average amount that's in a 529 plan is $40,000. Versus the allowable limit, which is up into the $500,000 amount. So it's definitely something to kind of take a look at or just understand that there are options on there. Even without that rollover provision, if you do have a 529 plan and your children or your beneficiary is of an age, the flexibility in the 529 plan, you could roll it over to, or actually move the whole 529 plan over to, obviously your spouse, to your cousins. It's incredible how you can move that over to other individuals. So something to think about. The other thing to think about, there's two legislative actions that occurred over the last several weeks that, again, impact all schools in general, just to kind of bring it out. So one thing that came up was that this has to do with, on January 30th, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld a Florida school district's policy for separating bathrooms by biological sex. And this is a reversal from the Ashton-Whitaker case that occurred in the 7th district. Not necessarily reversal, but now it's a conflict. So back in May of 2017, the three-judge Seventh Circuit panel issued a unanimous ruling in Ashton's favor. Appeals court affirmed the preliminary injunction held that the Kenosha School District, so Kenosha, Wisconsin, had violated Title IX of the Equal Protection Clause, that held that a policy that requires an individual to use a bathroom that does not conform with his or her gender identity punishes that individual for his or her gender nonconformance, which in turn violates Title IX. Now with the 11th Circuit, again, that's Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi, now interpreted a little bit differently. In a 7-4 decision, held that the district's policy of separating access to communal bathrooms by biological sex and, as an alternative, providing single-stall, sex-neutral bathrooms for use by transgender students did not violate Title IX or the Equal Protection Clause. What they said was, in terminating the scrutiny, concluded that sex-based classification in the district's bathroom policy served the important governmental objective of protecting students' privacy in school bathrooms, and B, the policy was substantially related to the achievement of that objective because bathrooms, like locker rooms or shower facilities, are one of the spaces in a school where bodily exposure is most likely to occur. Then they go on to really cite why the court determined, why they felt in that situation it was different than the Ashton-Whitaker situation back in 2017. So again, what this means is you have two appellate districts, federal districts, that now have opposing views, which mean eventually this will probably culminate with the Supreme Court coming up with their interpretation of this particular piece. The other aspect, another area that, again, has recently come up, was the affirmation, or really a view that came up from the 9th District, so this is the West Coast, as well as Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, and Montana. And in this situation, it was that appellate court combined two cases, Chen versus Albany Unified School District and Epple versus Albany Unified School District. In this situation, they determined in a different view the Mahoney Supreme Court case that was recently viewed back about 2 years ago. In this situation, what had happened was two students had used off-campus devices, Instagram, and they made it private, but had, by luck, or not by luck, but by crook, it became public. In so doing, the school found out about it, and upon viewing the posts, the assistant principal considered the threats of violence and called the police. Epple and Chen were suspended and then expelled for harassment and bullying based on race and gender. Epple and Chen brought suit, arguing that the school could not discipline them under the First Amendment for their off-campus speech. What the court actually said in this scenario is that actually you could, and reaffirmed, went back to the Mahoney area to say why they could actually do that particular piece. And so it's interesting, you have to go to the Mahoney case to kind of really see why. And I'll just kind of maybe briefly talk about it because I think these things are always interesting as you start delving into them. The special circumstances that give schools additional license to regulate student speech, but do not always disappear when that speech takes place off campus. So we all know they can regulate within the school, but they can also regulate outside of school, as the Supreme Court says. The school's interest in teaching good manners and consequently in punishing the use of vulgar language aimed at part of the school community is weakened considerably by the fact that Mahoney, in this case, spoke outside the school on her own time, spoke under the circumstances where the school did not stand in local parentis, and vulgarity in the post encompass a message of criticism. In addition, the school has presented no evidence of any general effort to prevent students from using vulgarity outside of the classrooms. Now they go on to say, and this is the important parts, is we have made it clear that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression. But we have also made it clear that courts must apply the First Amendment in light of the special characteristics of the school environment. One such characteristic, which we have stressed, is the fact that schools at times stand in local parentis, i.e. in place of parents. This course has previously outlined 3 specific categories of student speech that schools may regulate in certain circumstances. Number 1, indecent, lewd, or vulgar speech uttered during school assemblies or on school grounds, speech uttered during class trip that promotes illegal drug use, speech that others may reasonably perceive as hearing the imprimatur of school, such as appearing in a school-sponsored newspaper. In regulating speech that materially disrupts classwork or involves substantially disorder or the invasion of rights of others, and unlike the Third Circuit, we do not believe that special characteristics that give schools additional license to regulate student speech always disappear when the school regulates speech that takes place off campus. The school's regulatory interests remain significant in some off-campus situations. These include serious or severe bullying, harassment, targeting of particular individuals, threats aimed at a teacher or other students, the failure to follow rules, consensual lesions, the writing of papers, the use of computers, so forth and so on. So really what they're saying is that, like all things, it depends, right? And you have to look at that specific situation, and then if it's general criticism, they tend to decide that that's free speech. But if it breaks the ground of specific actionable actions or specific targeting, that's when the courts, at least in the interpretation I've read here, seem to side on the fact that the schools can discipline students in that particular area. The last piece, sorry, I'm trying to go fast. The last piece is just to talk, there was a recent emails that came out about action alerts about the Senate call to action about House Bill 5188, and this is the what's referred to maybe the sex education or the particular provision. The big piece on this is that it would go into effect as passed or as amended would go into effect this July. And so there's a lot of concern on that in that does it give the school enough time to those that have opted not to abide by this particular process here, enough time to then come up with processes. This right now is still in a holding pattern. I'm sure there's a better legal or legislative view of it, but that's the basic sense of what changed. Otherwise, all the provisions of the parents having the ability to opt out, what you should teach, and actually reading the amendment, and I'll be honest, it's the first time I actually read the bill. I was like, well, it's not that bad. It really covers a lot of things that we should be covering or at least talking about, right? So it's just something to kind of look at, is that all things don't appear as they are until you actually read through the document. With that, Stacy, anything to add?
The only other bill I would note that our food service director is drafting a response, and some of her thoughts on is House Bill 1574, requiring districts to fulfill student requests for halal and kosher meals, just because of the limitations of our school district kitchens. It's not that we can't provide the meals, but under the way the law is drafted, it would become very difficult to the extent we'd probably have to outsource that, whereas our interest would be in trying to meet, as we do for a variety of student needs, meet interests of students and family in-house.
Okay, thank you, Rich and Stacy, on the EdRed summaries here. And remind me, Rich, so I know Bridget Peach, does she send all board members these emails? So if we want to read it later on, do we have it in our inbox?
You see the, yes, you get the general emails about EdRed, and then oftentimes there's a reference to other material that's germane, and that's how I kind of just start following the dots and saying, oh, well, look, this has impact to potentially the school.
So we all have that?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Great.
Now, I go into the, like, for example, I went and actually looked at the law. I went to the Supreme Court case to read, you know, their opinion.
Right.
Those types of things, so.
I don't know if the full board gets the EdRed emails, but we can make sure you can sign up for them if you wish to get them.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful, but that way we've all looked at it beforehand. We all have the information.
We can sign you up, and then you can unsubscribe if you don't.
Yeah, if we're in it. That way we have all the information there. Okay, thank you. And so moving on to IASB, just a quick note, you may know that the executive director, Dr. Tom Bertrand, is going to be retiring. So the executive committee is actually looking at interviewing somebody new for that role. So we'll find out, I believe, by the spring, summertime, as to who the new executive director would be. So Tom is, has done an excellent job leading Illinois Associated School Boards, and he's going to be really missed. He's an excellent professional and has done a lot of advocacy work, and has also done a lot of advocacy work at the national level on behalf of us. So that'd be great. NSSCO, Gina and Scott.
The superintendent search for NSSCO is really kind of being brought forward now. Is wrapping up, and candidates are going to be brought in front of the board in the next month or so. So that's going to be an exciting process to see who's going to be our next wonderful superintendent for NSSCO and drive that organization even further forward. So I'll keep you posted on how that's going. Moving forward with the board, that's going to be a good kind of background. So when we have to eventually go to that process, it's good to have some insight in how that's working. So I'll let you know, but we're excited because now it's kind of being brought to the board. I know this board takes school safety very seriously. On December 2nd, NSSCO had a ribbon cutting for a different aspect of school safety that I thought was interesting. They partnered with Arlington Dermatology and Dr. Bucalo, and Arlington helped provide a sunscreen, an actual structure to cover a swing to keep the students protected from the sun and harmful UV rays. So when they presented it that way, I thought that was very interesting, and it was a great ribbon cutting event, and the kids were very excited. They were swinging on the swing and looking at the nice new sunscreen at Minor School. So we were very excited for that. So I don't know if I mentioned earlier, it was at Minor School that this happened, and it was good times. So stay tuned. We'll have more to come.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that summary and representing the board at all these fun NSSCO events. Thank you. Next, we have community input, and we, as always, the board appreciates attendance and welcomes comments from our community, and know that the opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a comment to make about the business of the board. The board appreciates hearing from our stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. As the board strives to make the best decisions for the district, public input can be helpful. In order for the board to reserve sufficient time to conduct its business and to operate its meetings in the spirit of civility and decorum, speakers are expected to follow the following guidelines. Number 1, address the board only at the time provided on the agenda and only after being recognized by the board president. Number 2, identify yourself and be brief. Your comments must be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, and the board may shorten this allowed time in order to conserve time to allow the maximum number of people the opportunity to speak. And number 3, please be respectful and courteous, and the board requests that you not make statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board or our staff. The board typically does not respond to comments or attempt to answer questions during the public comment period, but we do listen intently and appreciate the input from our community. And always know that you can email the board, and we will always respond. The board email is on our website, and you can always email Dr. Byen, and she will always get back to you as well. So there's many opportunities to get in touch with us beyond the public comment section of our board meeting. Lana, do we have any comments? Wow, no comments after all that. Like, okay. Okay. Thank you. Well,
Ask first.
I know. Next time I'll be like, do we have any comments? And then I'll ask. That's a good tip. I know. Moving on, we have communications from district partners. Today, do we have comments from PTA?
I don't think so tonight.
Yeah, not tonight. Today was first day of, you all know, right? Today was first day back for our students, so we're really excited. So I'm sure the PTA is super busy kind of collaborating with schools to make fun happen. What about ABC 25? Gina, do we have any updates? Okay.
So first and foremost, if you haven't gone out on the ABC 25 challenge, which again, the date is tax day, 4/15/2023, to sign up for the race, right? Big community involvement. We have an excellent DJ. We always have an excellent DJ who helps us out. And we usually have a mascot race or something fun and engaging. It's a wonderful community event. But more importantly right now, while everybody's getting ready to prepare for this wonderful run, is vote for your t-shirt, vote for your favorite t-shirt. So we have, the artistry comes from the students and within our district, and you can vote for this year's t-shirt, which will be passed out to those who register in advance for the challenge at abc25challenge.org/t-shirt. There are 3 wonderful shirts to vote for, and then whichever student does actually win based on the popularity of votes, that student is recognized within their school with balloons and wonderful fanfare, and it's very exciting for the student. So if you could go out and take a look and vote, that it would be very much appreciated. In addition, ABC 25 Foundation is proud to present our very first membership activity, which is slated for next Monday on the 16th while the kids are out of school. And it is a hands-on forensic science STEM assembly. And you have to sign up in advance. There are still a few slots that are available that are open, and that can be found at abc25.org. And if you are an ABC 25 member, it is free for your students. And I would encourage you to sign up with your students and then go ahead and participate in the foundation and this wonderful event. We're very much looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gina. My little guy and I signed up, so I'm excited for next Monday to participate with the ABC 25 Foundation. So you're saying that's a first membership event?
That is the first time that we are offering a free membership event for the members of the community who are participating and supporting ABC 25.
Okay, very cool. So all the
Yep.
reason more to become members, right?
Exactly,
ABC 25.
exactly.
Okay, thanks so much. Next, we have ATA with Allison Berg.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So instead of the top 5, I have the top 6 awesome things going on in District 25. I'm not focusing on any school, but the district as a whole tonight. So one of our winter traditions at Olive is trying to find the gingerbread men that ran away. Kindergartners followed the clues to see where it was going next, and unfortunately they didn't catch them this time, but they sure did have a fun time trying. They also enjoyed creating different ways for the gingerbread man to get across the river. So here are some pictures of our friends at Olive, our little gingerbread men, and there they are constructing different ways to get that, there he is in the river, to get him across the river. There's another one. So some kindergarten fun. The primary instructional classes at Windsor School went on their annual dollar store and McDonald's field trip before winter break. This trip allows students to practice how to act appropriately and navigate in the community. Students buy holiday gifts for their families, and then they order lunch at McDonald's, eat, play, and then they head back to school to wrap their presents. It is a day filled with fun and hard work, and here they are enjoying their McDonald's lunch and wrapping presents and buying their presents. It's a really cool experience for our friends at Windsor School. Windsor School has another winter tradition. Before winter break, students always have an opportunity to hear a winter story. Usually our principal or our assistant principal takes each grade level in. Sometimes they have a crackling fire on the overhead on the projector, and they get to hear a story the day before winter break, and it's a really fun chance for our principals to be guest readers and our students to have a little fun before winter break. Here, I'm not actually sure what this is a picture of to tell you. Actually, I do. Never mind. These are our middle school students. I'm moving on to middle school. In December, the Thomas Student Council, along with help of staff, students, and community, this is not the picture. It's for the next one, but I'll be there in a second. bear with me. Okay, in December, the Thomas Student Council, with the help of staff, students, and community, hosted a Be the Good Challenge event. And I actually have an entire slideshow on this. It's a really fun event. They raised $3,300 to support local families in need. It was a super fun event hosted by Thomas Middle School with teachers and students, and I'm going to show you a little video about that in a second. In November, both Thomas and South hosted, this is the picture. Nope, for the next one. Nope, this is the picture. Nope, it's for the next one. I take it back. In November, both Thomas and South hosted food drives. 2 truckloads of food were donated to the Wheeling Township Food Pantry, also by the student councils at the middle schools. This picture, finally, both Thomas and South student councils raised over $5,000 for Lemons of Love, which is an organization in Mount Prospect that serves families that are dealing with cancer. Both South and Thomas student council reps, together with the support of their parents, families, hosted over 20 lemonade stands throughout Arlington Heights, and that was done in the fall. And I also have a slideshow about that, but these are some of the things that they purchased with their money to be donated. So I'm just going to go ahead. This is the Lemons of Love. This is the from South. They purchased 104 boxes of crayons, socks, coloring books, $2,500 from South, and again, about the same amount of money from Thomas. They raised, which is awesome. And here's just some pictures of the lemonade stands, and I also have another video to share on that one. Really cool things going on in the district. Hey, Adam, you want to pull up one of those videos for me? Thanks. Yeah, no lemonade stands right now. This is the Be the Good. This was the Thomas event that raised over $3,000 for local families in need, and this is just a slide, show some of the pictures of the actual event. Actually, you may have seen it on Twitter. It looked like a lot of fun. Totally awesome school event. And then I'm going to share one more video, and this one is for the Lemons. I never want to say it wrong. The Lemons of Love organization.
Happy lemons for
This is the best job, to just share all the awesome things going on in the district. And a huge shout out to both South and Thomas for creating those videos and allowing me to share them with you tonight. Next week, our next board meeting, I will be back to shine the spotlight on Dryden. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Allison. Allison is always a really tough act to follow. We don't have music up here. Like, no. No, for sure, and we're so proud. This is why we serve, and this role is to see the smiles that you just showed us just now, and we're so proud of all our civic leaders supporting and contributing to our communities in such positive ways. So thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that with us, and to the Thomas and South teams. Okay, we are going to move on without music to the consent agenda, and I need a motion and a second for approval of consent agenda items.
Madam President?
Yes, Rich.
We're going to do a slight variation here. First, I'd like to move that we remove an agenda, remove from the action item, point E, excuse me, Policy Committee meeting minutes of December 13th, 2022.
Okay. I need a second.
I'll second that, Rich.
Just to give the board some information on that, we're just removing it, not from more of a procedural issue, is that the approval of those minutes should be in that committee, not in this board. So those committee minutes will be moved back to that committee to be approved at that future meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich. And the second part of it you have? Oh, yes, sorry.
We need a vote on
We need
that.
a
We need a vote
vote. So
on
Lana,
that.
if you could please call the vote on that portion of the consent agenda. We're confusing Lana.
That's okay.
You can call the same order twice.
No, that's okay, I'm good. Member Olenichek?
Yes.
Member Cerniglia?
Yes.
Member Jogi?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Madam President?
Okay, yes, Rich.
Oh, sorry,
Thank you.
there's a technicality you got to do, it passes, right?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, all right, Madam President.
Yes, Rich.
I move that the Board of Education approves those items on the consent agenda as follows. The personnel report and addendum to personnel report, treasurer's report, invoices, board bills, public hearing of the tax levy meeting minutes of December 13, 2022, regular and closed session meeting minutes of December 13, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Brian, for the second. And Lana, could you please call the vote?
Member Cerniglia?
Yes.
Member Jogi?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Abstain?
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That passed 6.
With one abstention.
Yeah, with one abstention. Okay, thank you very much. Now we will move on to student learning, and we'll begin with the informational and discussion item regarding summer youth funding, and Dr. Becky Fitzpatrick will come up
Thank
for
you.
this point.
Becky and I will kind of do this together for
Thanks,
the
Lori.
board. So there were questions from the board about Summer U. Actually, Stacy's going to chime in as well. As you remember, the last couple of years, summer of 2021, summer of 2022, the district used ESSER funding to offset the tuition cost of Summer U's academic review courses. And so we received some questions from the board about Summer U as you consider how to best fund it moving forward. Becky, do you want to go through some of those? You want me to keep going? Keep going. Okay. We talked about to what extent was there an enrollment increase when the board used ESSER funds. And so we do provide for you in board docs in your packet what the enrollment was for Summer U from 2017 through 2022. And 2017, 18, 19, the review classes were not free, correct?
Correct.
In 2020, we didn't have Summer U, but then in 21 and 22, highlighted in rows for you, it shows which of those classes, review classes, were where the tuition was covered by ESSER funds. So in general, you can see that in 2021, the first summer that we utilized ESSER funds, the overall review class enrollment went to 435 students. And then in 2022, the following summer, still higher than typical, but we did drop down to 387 students in those review courses. As a reminder to the board, enrichment courses that we offer, we still were charging tuition, and that's typically $10 a session. So if we have 14 days, it's $140 is typically what we have charged for Summer U. The other part of Summer U to remind you about is our multilingual program. We do utilize one of our grants to pay for that. That has been free tuition for those students at least the last 12 years. Bless you. So it does show that when those review classes when the tuition was covered, we did see an increase in enrollment in those. We saw that drop off a bit the second year, so we don't know for sure, but is that trending back to where it was originally? Again, still higher than it was the first few years. Becky, did I miss anything on enrollment? Okay, thank you. Another question was, what was the quantity of return on investment for kids that went to Summer U? Becky, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have two different pieces of information. As the board might recall, we did not have an administration of the ISAT test in the school year. Let me get my years right. In the school year of spring 2020. So we only had MAP data. So at that point in time, we presented to the board the information that we had. We decided to look more closely at our MAP information since that was the only information we had. Was there any sort of a change in performance at that time? The board might recall that we did caution you to interpret those results with a couple things in mind. That was remote testing we had for MAP testing. We had a different number of students participating. And also in taking a look at the students that participated in summer school, we had some insignificant sample sizes because really we were looking for students that participated in at least 80% of summer school to determine whether or not it really truly had an impact. By the fall of 2022, we were back to having ISAT result, or ISAT, did I say ISAT earlier? Wow. IAR results. I'm back in the dark ages there. We had IAR and MAP information available. We also began working with ECRA, who has now provided us with information that comes in the form of an effect size, where they really take those two different measures that are on different scales, combine them to be able to provide one piece of information. So we had two different pieces of information to share with you at that time, but you can see from the charts we provided to the board what kind of a change or potential impact. The board might recall from the most recent presentation that if you look at summer school reading growth for those students that participated in summer school, it's a 0.09 effect size, indicating there was a somewhat positive impact. Same thing for math. It was a 0.15 return on investment based on the effect size.
Sorry, Becky, which document are you referring to now? That one? Let me see.
Summer school ROI was what we presented at the most recent fall 2022 board presentation. Yeah, yeah.
Another question was, what would be the potential impact on other programs if the board decides to fund tuition for summer youth? We believe the impact of providing free summer youth would be positive in the following ways. Students maintain the learning, right? So the students continuing their learning and having more time to hold on. Thank you. More time to hold on to what they've learned and have it reinforced. And of course, if we included the enrichment courses and summer band, which we also offer, that's extended enjoyment programming for families that would make that choice. Otherwise, we don't predict that there would be an impact on other programming. It would really be, that extending learning times for kids that could use that extra assistance, and then providing more opportunities for our families to enroll their kids in enrichment programs. And there was a question about what would be a reasonable offset if we added Summer U to the district's budget. There's nothing that administration would recommend that we offset that with by deleting, especially because Summer U and Summer Band are optional experiences. However, this could be added to the budget and taken from the district reserves annually, as long as the enrollment is steady from what we project, right? If the enrollment spiked and had a bigger impact financially on the fund balance, we'd want to revisit that. There was a question also about what would be the total cost of Summer U to the budget if we included everything. So if we included enrichment classes, support classes, the summer band, if we included all of that, we're looking at, I believe, at about $123,000 annually. Stacy, do you happen to know if we just did the support classes enrollment, like we did with ESSER funding? Again, ESSER funding we just did for those support classes. Parents still paid tuition for band and for enrichment courses.
So that 113,000 is the cost of just the academic classes.
Okay.
Because the summer 22 summer school enrollment was more reflective of typical summer school enrollment, it just all the classes were academic instead of having both. Having both could bring more kids back. So it's hard to know how many, but since enrollment was more typical, I would say we would expect it to be around there, the the 113,000, that is just academic courses.
That is just the academic support classes. Okay, my mistake, okay. I think that was kind of it. Becky, was there anything you wanted to add?
No.
Do you want to go back to that?
I'm sorry, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, that's both. Sorry,
both.
the 113 is both.
Both
So
review and
the
enrichment.
113,000 cost is for the academic support classes and enrichment program. So if we paid for everything that could be offered in Summer U, except for the multilingual program.
And the band is the separate
Right.
9,500.
So do we know do we have any sense of if we just cover the cost of the academic support classes? If we just covered that tuition, do we have a sense of what that would be?
It's hard to say. A course is roughly, the teacher cost for a half day, so 2 sections or 2 courses, is about $1,800.
And then if we look
So it
at
depends on
enrollment-
how many courses were offered for
Sure.
just the academic. Plus we cover the principal costs, the supplies, the AP, the secretary, the nurse. But I don't have a breakout of the difference between the two.
Right. If we just, if we took the enrollment that we had this last summer just for those review classes, and we just timed it what we typically charge families for tuition, it's about $54,000, just the tuition cost, for just the review classes. So we charge about $140 per student for tuition. So if we use this last summer, we'd be looking at about a $54,000 cost. Again, that doesn't cover everything, but it covers what we would typically charge families.
And I have a question, because of course, as a board, right, we have a lot of expenses this year. So but if there was a family who couldn't afford to attend the academic support or the enrichment, they could still be accommodated if they reached out to the district, correct?
Definitely, we would work with all families. We would not, correct me if I'm wrong, typically in a normal summer, the academic review courses, students are suggested or encouraged to take those, and we would not prevent a student from participating in that case. With the enrichment courses, we'd probably try to work out with the family some sort of agreement on payment.
And how do we communicate and outreach to families to let them know that, hey, this wouldn't be a cost to families? Like, how could we get that word out to families in need?
We typically do that through our social workers or our school principals that know families that could use some assistance, or who have talked with them about, I'd really like my child to go to this, but we can't afford it.
Okay, thank you.
That's the general information.
Madam President,
Yes, Greg.
I just want to offer a few comments up front. First, I really appreciate the detailed, specific answers that the staff has provided. Just really went to the heart of the questions, and also bringing forward the previously shared materials. There's so much we get to see here at the board table, and thank you for pulling out the relevant stuff for us and putting it in front of us for these questions. I also really appreciated the inclusion of John Hattie's research, and I'm wondering if you could, for our discussion here, maybe give a brief background. I mean, you gave us all those points, but how we should reference that in terms of thinking about this.
Sure. So right, although not necessarily based on a specific question that was posed by the board, just felt as though if you were embarking on this type of decision-making, perhaps this research would be of benefit to you. So John Hattie's research is actually something that we've talked about in a previous board meeting. There was a previous discussion about the benefits of small group instruction, and we referenced his research. He's a researcher out of the University of Melbourne in Australia. He's done extensive research in the form of meta-analysis of other studies that have been performed. just kind of simplifying it, he takes all of those other studies that have different scales for determining whether certain aspects of education are beneficial, and he puts them onto one scale and comes up with, again, effect size. We've talked about that metric quite a bit as of late. And I think it's for 231, if I'm not mistaken, different aspects of education. He's come up with effect sizes that really kind of help us. It's just one additional piece of information to take a look at when making some decisions about where we might get the best bang for our buck. So in terms of summer school, his meta-analysis determined it's at a 0.23 or green, if you're looking at the chart that we provided you. That would suggest that summer school is likely to have positive impact on student achievement. Anything over I think it's 0.04 is determined to have a positive, 0.4 is determined to have a positive impact on education. So those of you that are looking at the sheet, 0.19, sorry, 0.19, which is yellow, which is likely to have a small, likely to have a small positive impact on student achievement. But if you look at some others that are on the chart, like if you were to swing over to, let's see, what would be one? Comprehensive instructional programs for teachers. That has an effect size of 0.72. That's very likely to have a positive impact on student achievement. So that would more likely be something that we would admire as a way to accelerate student growth. So just one other piece of information for the board to consider.
So considering the data point of Hattie's research and the ROI shared from ECRA, we value summer school, but it doesn't have an outsized impact on our student learning.
Based on that
statement?
meta-analysis,
Okay.
that's what it would suggest, yes.
Any other questions, comments?
Madam President, Becky, thank you. I like the. Yeah, thank you. Well, I was going to say disjointedness of it. Colors is, small font is also.
Sorry about that, yeah.
No, but it's interesting because, again, coming into this, I would have thought differently
Okay.
than looking at even some of the data. And, even as Greg mentioned, reflecting on some of the previous data, that I thought it would have a bigger impact, and it's showing that it's not, and therefore, is it the best use of our funds to do that if we're already offering programs saying, hey, we strongly encourage you to go, okay, that takes care of those, versus offering it where we get a plethora, and even if we got that plethora, is the need now in that area? Is there somewhere else that we can invest that would have a larger impact than really on summer school? And again, as we look at the numbers, we'd really be impacting, 100, so we're talking, less than a small percentage of our total student body. So the bang for the buck may not be there.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you, Rich and Greg, for those comments. Okay, Dr. Bang?
Does the board want to have us do something, bring something back to you on this? Do you feel at this point this discussion doesn't need to move forward?
I'll suggest for my colleagues that based on what we've seen tonight, though, again, we value summer school and what it does for our students. We do have limited resources with infinite concerns, and for now, I think we're in a good place with the programs we have.
Okay, thank you, Greg, for that. Anything else? Are we good? I think we all are in agreement. I'm seeing heads nod, all in agreement with what Greg is suggesting. And so, yeah, no further action. And I think it just maybe that point about we continue to outreach so families know that this is, having that tuition stipend is an option. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next topic on the agenda is it is a discussion informational item. I will be discussing the library media program and first reading of policy 2022-230. And we have some staff here to join Dr. Becky Fitzpatrick. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing from our library team.
Thank you. As they're getting organized, I will share with the board that we kind of thought we would do this in 3 parts tonight to just first of all refamiliarize the board with our library program and what all occurs in our school libraries and is facilitated by our library media center specialists. Then I know the board had, as part 2, a request to discuss policy 6230, which is our library policy. So we'll, after our presentation and some questions there, we'll move to the second part. And then should we need a third part, we can add that on as well. Okay. So Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Oops. All right, well, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about our library media centers. Tonight, we're going to share some information about our library media center's mission and vision, a little bit about personnel, the collection within our LMCs. We're going to talk about some of our community partnerships as a result of our LMCs. We're going to talk about what instruction looks like. And we're going to talk a little bit about programming. And so I have with me a few people here to help me do that. So I have our newest coordinator in the Department of Student Learning. She started with us this fall, Katie Paulson. In addition to overseeing library media centers, she also guides advanced learning and creative arts. And then we're also joined by 2 of our outstanding LMC directors. From Dryden, we have Beth Kavasik. And from Thomas, we have Becky Fano, who also, it just so happens, is behind the Be the Good, which you saw the videos of. So very involved. But we'll start with the mission. This is something that's been crafted and reworked by our library and media center directors. They're very passionate about this. They've spent countless hours working on these documents that contain the mission and the vision. So of note within the mission, we really value the role of our LMCs in contributing to high academic achievement and a love of literacy and learning. Through collaboration with all other school professionals, our library media directors provide opportunities to cultivate students that are effective users and producers of ideas and information. Further, we consider our LMCs to be hubs of our school, kind of literally and figuratively. If you've been in many of our schools, many of them are kind of right in the heart of our schools, but they also have a lot of information, valuable information. We're very fortunate in this district to have a large collection of resources. Katie's going to talk a little bit about that. Not only do we have a large collection, but they're in a variety of formats that match student and curricular needs. They provide access to diverse points of view and support recreational reading. Our LMCs are dynamic and fluid environments, and if you've ever been in our LMCs lately, you'll probably see that they're really designed to be flexible, accommodating everything from large-scale events like an author visit perhaps to small group instruction, and includes flexible seating and furniture arrangement. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Katie to talk a little bit more specifically about the vision of our LMC.
Okay, so as you can see here, our vision as a district is fulfilled by having a full-time certified school librarian at every school, in addition to a LMC teaching assistant in every library. Our instructional program is designed through collaboration with teachers, but also touches on curricular areas. Additionally, our librarians teach information fluency skills, promote ethical use of information, provide inquiry research experiences for problem solving, decision making, and construction of new knowledge. Continued here, our program includes updated diverse collections of resources, as Becky said, in various formats that support our curriculum at each grade level, and they also fit the needs of individual students in every building. We provide access to current instructional and information technologies as well in our libraries. We strive to create a culture that fosters an appreciation of literature and also promotes lifelong engagement in reading. Students are given equitable and timely access to resources, delivery of services as well. And they're also instructed in the skills needed to live in and contribute to a global community. Our libraries are facilities that are conducive to learning, that have reading nooks, flexible furniture, and collaborative learning spaces. We also highly value our partnerships with our parents and the community. As far as personnel, like I previously stated, each school in our district at all 9 buildings have a certified full-time library media specialist in addition to an LMC teaching assistant. And the way this is structured is the LMC director develops, promotes, and implements our programs while the assistant plays the essential role of maintaining the collections. This means supporting the circulation of books, that check in, check out, and keeping it all organized, which is a big feat. And they also help in the utilization of those library resources when kids come into the libraries. As far as additional personnel, back one. Sorry.
Jumped.
One more. No. Is there one before that?
That, we just were on that one.
Oh, there's one, the other staff in our library. It includes our, the library media specialist and the TA, but also there's a building support technician, a technology facilitator, and we also consider our volunteer parents part of our team too. All of those people make our libraries work. And we're really lucky to have all of those people in all of our buildings. And then this slide, oh, there it is. Okay, sorry, go back. We're just jumping around here. Go back to the image. Thank you. Okay, so this image shows, we think, really captures the role of a school librarian. As we said, it's the hub of a school, which means that it is used in so many different ways. They certainly wear many hats as librarians, and all of our directors demonstrate their ability to follow through on all of these different roles. And every time students step into the library, we see many of these different things. The collection of books that we have, so there we go, is, we're proud to say 109,359 books in our collection, and that's district-wide. But really what's important to note is that the result of having this type of collection means we are able to give students and staff a large variety of texts to choose from. Continuing about our collection development, just to give you a little information about that. As you can imagine, developing and maintaining a library collection of over 100,000 books is not a small task. Collection development is an essential part of the role of our LMC directors. Having certifications in the area of library information science results in having highly qualified professionals in that role. They maintain and develop collections in accordance with the American Library Association's Bill of Rights, which was first established in 1939. Remains a guiding post to all librarians nationwide to this day. The collections support and differentiate our curriculum in every single grade level, and they create effective users of ideas and information, competent, enthusiastic readers, and independent learners, and positive contributors to the school community and the greater society. Our collections at each school have texts available in various formats in addition to reading levels, and support the diverse needs and interests and viewpoints of our entire school community. They also include content by and about a wide array of people, cultures, and to authentically reflect a variety of ideas, information, stories, and experiences. And the last part about the collection, our directors continually select, maintain, and support access to content on subjects by diverse authors and creators that meet the needs, interests, and abilities of the people that the libraries serve. Additionally, materials are acquired in order to address popular demand, stakeholder input, collection gaps, and unexpressed information needs. You would never believe the number of times our school librarians go searching for even more titles about Legos or sharks because the kids have read every single one. Additionally, collection maintenance involves what we call weeding, and that's our process of deselecting materials throughout the year. This helps us create well-balanced and ideal collections, and that means that the collections are up to date, they're reliable information. Selecting materials that align to the curriculum, instructional programs, and the school community is no small feat, and we continue to be impressed by the work of our directors each year. Next, I'm going to have Beth, who is our LMC director at Dryden, talk a little bit about our community partnerships that we have and the programming at the elementary level.
Good evening. One way that we partner with our community members, like Arlington Heights Memorial Library, Anderson's Bookshop, the Bookstall, and our fantastic PTAs, is by hosting author visits. They're an excellent way to connect kids with books and authors to understand the writing process, and they get so excited, and it's so impactful for them to meet authors in real life. And they just love it. And our partnerships with those organizations help us bring those authors in. We're very thankful for the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, award-winning in its own right, who supports our students and our teachers with book bags, book talks, librarians who come and visit. They bring the bookmobile to all of our second graders. They provide an awesome summer reading program, and they help us bring in those authors as well. They also, and this is huge, they provide a AHML card for every staff member, which is no small feat when you're trying to coordinate all those taxing bodies to give access to all the resources for our staff members who serve our community, who don't live here. And I just can't emphasize enough how complicated that is and what a great resource it is for teachers to be able to access not only the books, but the digital resources and the databases that are so expensive for us to subscribe to. So that's a really fantastic partnership. As far as instruction, it's based on our LMC standards, which we developed. We blended together all of these other standards to guide our instruction. In the elementary schools, students visit 45 minutes for kindergarten, first and second grade, and 60 minutes for third through fifth grade. And the middle school has a flexible schedule based on student and staff needs. We do so much stuff in the library. We do research that's aligned with the classroom, reflecting the collaboration between the classroom teachers and the LMC to enrich and enhance the content that they're teaching in the classroom. Our read-alouds and our fiction studies also support many times what they're doing in the classroom. We also participate in our state Reader's Choice Book Award lists, and many of our buildings offer book clubs, One Book, One School programs, and many other opportunities for kids to engage with books. We also collaborate a lot with our tech facilitators. A lot of our schools just completed Coding Week and other tech-based opportunities. Our tech facilitator at Dryden is amazing. She just did all our third grade weather videos. We also set up reading contests. We have family reading nights and book fairs in collaboration with our PTAs, and just really try to engage our whole community.
In the middle school LMCs, the LMCs work hard to support and provide grade level and school level programming. The One Book, One School initiative builds a sense of community. Author visits, book tastings, and reading challenges encourage and motivate students to explore, stretch themselves as readers, and think creatively. The middle school summer reading program encourages students to stay connected to literacy, and in doing so, stay engaged academically during the summer months. The summer reading program also provides a pretty cool opportunity to welcome future Cardinal and Timberwolves. We love going into the fifth grade classrooms. It's a treat. I was honored and proud to stand before you in the fall as a coach to our state cross-country team at Thomas. And just as those students have found their pack and their place on a cross-country course, there are many, many students who find their pack and sense of belonging within the walls of our libraries. Our additional programming allows students to connect with one another and to further explore their interests and passions. One such program is the Battle of the Books. Children elect to read more, which is awesome. And the two middle schools combined every year draw over 100 students to participate in this program. And at the end of our season, the top 3 teams from each school meet in a friendly competition. It's our championship battle. This program builds literacy, it encourages students to read for fun, and it absolutely builds a sense of camaraderie and teamwork. We also have a program called Artists Who Love to Read and various book clubs. These foster a sense of connection as well and belonging while tapping into students' various interests. We are beyond thankful to be in a position to offer these creative and engaging programming both before and after the school day.
So as we conclude our presentation tonight. I'm on a research kick, I guess. I would like to share a bit of research about the importance of library media centers in our schools. Studies have shown that students with strong library programs tend to earn better standardized testing scores. And since 1992, multiple school library media impact studies have shown positive correlations between high-quality library programs and student achievement. These literacy-rich and thought-provoking environments exist in every one of our schools due to the support of our board, parents, and incredible library media staff. And at this time, if anyone has any questions for any of us.
Thank you so much. I'll kind of start off here. Katie, Beth, and Becky, like truly, I was wrong. I take it back, Allison. You had the music, but there's every presentation that comes from our administrators and our schools so appreciated, full of information that's so important for us. The data, the research, we love the research, really significant. And the fact that we're here in Arlington Heights, not only with incredible libraries at our school buildings, but also have a 5-star library in Arlington, as far as Arlington Heights Memorial Library for us to benefit from is significant. And we are, our students do very well, and our libraries, as you have pointed out, is part of them. So truly, thank you. I have more questions and comments, but I'm going to open it up to my board colleagues for any other questions or comments, but thank you so much.
Madam President?
Yes, Rich.
Maybe just as Anisha pointed out, obviously you guys are doing a bang-up job in offering a lot of services to the students. Obviously there's a lot of programs, things of that nature that are out there. I want to hone in though, we've seen a rise recently and had a lot of feedback though on objections, book objections. So can you maybe just describe the process when someone, a parent, community member, et cetera, has a book objection, and how does that process work?
Sure. Currently, if an individual expresses a concern about a book, we have a process in place whereby they can complete a form, indicate what book they're objecting to, their reasons for objecting to said book. We then take the time to review the book relative to our strategic plan, our standards at all grade levels. We look at the developmental level of the textbook. So there's a variety of different factors that we consider when we read that book and provide a response to that individual regarding that objection.
I'll add to that, if I may. Our LMC directors, along with the coordinator and Becky, have submitted an updated procedure for book objections, but we've been holding on that, knowing that the board wanted to discuss this topic. Their updated procedure, pending what the board decides, includes similar process, but creating a committee of staff members. So if a certain book is objected to by a parent, the library media center director, along with their principal, would create a committee, and they have a certain odd number of people that be on this committee that represent teachers, LMC, depending on the situation. That entire committee would read that book, review the American Library Association Bill of Rights and our library vision and mission, and then that committee would have that discussion and make a decision. The difference there is right now, when a book objection comes in, administrators are reading that book and making a determination, so it just moves it to a larger staff committee process.
I appreciate that, and I think, because there are a couple that I just want to maybe hone in on and talk about that particular objection process here, because even in what you point out, it again just maybe goes to that particular process there. So I want to point out there's a book here, The Hate You Give, and again, I'm not passing judgment on the book. I'm talking about the speech in the book and things of that nature. So this is A Hate You Give. There was an objection made on July 24th of 2022 where they objected because of the book's vulgarity, language, anti-police areas, things of that nature. So I actually went and got the book, trying to just understand myself, because sometimes people have different interpretation of things of that nature. And this book was not removed It was not objected to, or I'm sorry, not removed. And so, you know, actually looking at the content, I'm pretty surprised, really, by it. The vulgarity in this book is pretty extreme, I think, in my sense, or is the way I look at it. Especially there are sections like, for example, I'll stand on a police car in the middle of the street chanting justice for Kali. People gathered around the car record in the scene with their phones and throw rocks at the windows. F-U-C-K. That cop brother, the guy. So this continues on. There's references to the N-word, to throwing Molotov cocktails, to hanging people, to things of that nature. And so even in our normal process of what we would call today, I mean, as an administrator looking at this book go, how does that align to our curriculum? And again, I'll open this up to our, the board here and saying, how does that book align to our curriculum where we talk about, different ways of being a global citizen? And here we are inciting violence against police officers, swearing, N-words, F-words, everything like that. How does that happen? And how do we not at least take a straw man back and go, maybe we should look at this?
Can I make a suggestion that, I'm happy to talk about that, and about that book that's been in our libraries since 2015, one of the most popularly checked out books when it was added to our libraries, again, many years ago. I'm happy to talk about that process and why we make that decision. I wanted to ask the board so that we could kind of allow our library media center specialists to go if we're done with basic questions about the overall program, since right now they're not involved in that objection process.
I just have one question.
Go ahead.
Really, because I know at the middle school level, right, there is an ability for, like, as I know from my middle schooler, I had assigned some to read additional, and this is going to lead into this conversation, but I'm just making sure it's clear. In the middle school, I can sign something and say, I want my daughter to be able to read certain material, right? I know that from an
Social issues.
social, right? They allow them to read that.
For the classroom? For the classroom novels, they have a variety of novels to choose from.
They choose from, right? And we can sign off and we approve it. Is that part of this program, or is that separate within? Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand.
That's separate, because the library is a place of choice of materials, and in the classroom, right, the teacher is going to present materials, but when we do those book studies, that's where the teachers send out ahead of time. We have 8 novels for kids to choose from.
That's all my question. I just was trying to understand how that all correlated together. That's all. Appreciate it.
Madam President?
Yes, Gina.
And I apologize, I was on a plane, so I missed committee of the whole if you guys discussed it at that point. But as part of the expansion into alternative forms of media, have we had a discussion, or do we have a plan to incorporate within the process the values around the cybersecurity of the media that is either linked as a part of electronic reading material? And what are we doing to ensure the overall safety of the community and of our electronic assets as it relates to the fact that, every time we create a new media or we create a new opportunity around electronics, we only create a better hacker. So the reality of it is how active are we around some of these things for the safety of our community of students?
Yeah, thank you. Currently, we do have a cybersecurity audit occurring. The board had brought that up as an interest in the past. So that is occurring and does address all of those, and Mr. Fano will be reporting out on that when it's completed. So that will identify if, as we add resources, if there's any gaps in our security of those systems.
That helps us on our side. I'm looking for confirmation that the authors or the people behind the sponsorship of the websites that are used within the media, how are we ensuring that the level of security is up to standard for student populations of their websites? And again, I'm not referencing links within our websites and separate, right? That's within our power to control. But if somebody is reading a book that has, electronically, that has an active website on it, that they choose to click on, how are we ensuring that those people are maintaining the same level of standards that we're maintaining for our own websites and what our students can see?
Yeah, that would be something that we would review, and if it was something that we didn't know up front was in there, as soon as it came to our attention, we'd review. There are very limited books that have those links, but I know the one that you're probably thinking of, and we have gone to those links, and they do have what we believe are the safety parameters that are appropriate for students who would access them.
Okay. I think that's something we should think about from a policy perspective, though.
Yeah.
Rich, your light was on. Did you have another question, Rich?
Oh, sorry. No.
Okay. Help me understand, as far as, I went to the American Library Association's website, and the American Association of School Librarians is housed under the ALA, and that website has a wealth of information, so it was really helpful to go to those sites as I was preparing for today's meeting. I'm not sure if you could remind me of your presentation, or if you could talk a little bit about the ALA's Bill of Rights, and what that encompasses, or kind of educate us a little bit about that piece. Or next time, I know I'm throwing it at you, but I can always reference it. But I'll tell my board colleagues that's a, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that'd be great for us as board members to go to the ALA Bill of Rights and kind of inform ourselves as board members on that document. So don't worry about it. We'll reference it ourselves as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd be happy to. Having it in front of me is really helpful to kind of speak to the specific parts, which I would be happy to do, absolutely, at another time, if that would be okay.
Okay, but for now, the reason I pointed out, mostly for my colleagues to look at that further, and for us to, I know it was a good piece of information for me, so for us to look at that further as board members. Any other questions for our educators here? Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for being here and for all your expertise.
Yeah. Thank you.
So as we move on and to go back to Rich's question, again, The Hate U Give, I believe, it's been in our libraries. It was published in 2015. It was off the shelf. As soon as we got it, it was a very highly demanded, requested book by our middle schoolers. When you can find in many materials I'm sorry. Okay, I just want to stop. Something's being handed to me.
Yeah.
So.
Is this, sorry, can I pause? What is this material? I'm kind of confused.
Sorry, I thought we were moving on to the next item on the agenda.
Oh, so is it copies that you have for us, Rich?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Again, you can always isolate portions in a book or a resource, but you need to read that whole material in whole and in context and understand the topic of that material. You can read Huckleberry Finn and isolate a part of it, right, and say it's not appropriate. But again, we have to go back to remembering that our staff, who are the experts in this area and focus in child literacy and child development, they're the experts in creating a collection that meets a wide range of interests and that gives students choices not only to amplify their curriculum, but to choose literacy and literature that they want to enjoy. Again, I have read The Hate U Give many times, and I believe it's an excellent book. It does have some words and some sections that you may want to talk about as a family, but if you put it in context, it's an excellent book for those who would choose it. So that's a real important thing. Again, when we look at objections, we take those seriously, but we need to review the whole resource in whole, which we do when we make a decision. And should the LMC idea, specialist idea, move forward in how we review those reconsideration requests in the future, again, it would be even a larger committee that would read that entire resource before making a decision.
Madam President, I just want to.
Yes, Greg.
Before we go too far, I want to go back and make sure I'm understanding when the objections, Dr. Fitzpatrick, you were talking about, those are objections to keeping a particular book in the collection? Is that what we're talking about? Or is it different than that?
No, I think the question was regarding situations where an individual objects to a book being in our collection.
And the board has a list of the objections that we've received. We did not receive any objections prior to the 21-22 school year. So in my 10 years here, 9 years here, the first time we received an objection is in the 21-22 school year. Since that time, 21-22, 22-23, I believe we've had 18 books out of the 110,000 that have been objected to by 8 families. So just to kind of give you the real data on that, we've had 8 families object to 18 books from our libraries, asking that they be removed from the libraries. Of those 18, 1 was not really in the library, but was an ebook during remote learning that came with a subscription. We got so that our kids could be reading when they were remote. There was a book on that site, not accessed by any students, but a parent found, and we agreed and did remove that resource.
Thank you, Dr. Bine, for that.
Sorry, Madam President. So, Laura, I
Rich.
appreciate what you're saying in those comments there, but a couple facts that you've communicated to us is all the books are not read, right?
Right, that would be impossible.
Right, so we don't know, we take it on face value that certain books are there. And again, I'm not saying that, certain books in the right criteria, in the right area, don't have some type of educational value. But when we look at a lot of these, we say, even if they're small segments, but I would maybe argue with you and separately that the hate you give, there's the vulgarity and many aspects of it. But, maybe as another example, the book of, The Absolute True Driver of a Part-Time Indian, where, here in one section, and this is multiple areas throughout here, it shows, they're actually saying that the kid go up and punch someone, and that's the approved version of what that person should do. And I get it, and there's pieces of that, but what I'm getting at is, as we look in terms of what we as a community look to, having the ability to understand, and maybe either books weren't looked at as much, books were looked at, having that opportunity where others are reviewing the material and that we do understand and maybe put some boundaries, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, is really important when we look at these things. We just can't say we're not a public library, right? Our books have to align as the court has said. And even in some of the rulings that I've talked about here that just came up as I was reading them, there are things that we do have a responsibility for in looking at what we're actually doing and what we choose to teach within our structural environment.
Madam President?
Yes, Greg.
I just want to make sure as we discuss it, it's a really important topic, and I understand, Rich, you're using specific books to illustrate a point, but I want to make clear that we are not discussing here at this table whether or not to include or not include those books in our collections, and that we stick to the larger questions that we need to address here at the board table. And I do have a question for you, Dr. Bine, Dr. Fitzpatrick. Could you, it seems like there's an assumption that if we haven't read the book, that we don't really know what's in it. Could you talk a little bit about, there is a review process for things that come into our collection. Could you illustrate or illuminate us on that?
Sure, yeah. Katie talked a little bit about that when she talked about collection development in the presentation. The LMC directors are using a variety of different resources. It might be common sense media. It might be book lists put out by different professional organizations. It's other reviews of the book. So they're gathering all of that information to make an educated decision then about what they're going to put into the collection.
I want to address another comment that was made, is that we are not a public library. In fact, and we all know this, we are funded by public funds, and actually the First Amendment rights are not abridged by the fact that we are a school, we have school libraries. Our minors have those rights, and we can talk about the difference between First Amendment rights with regard to curriculum and how we access resources in the library, and I think I have some notes, but I know there are experts here that could speak eloquently to that. But let's be clear that we are a public library.
And sorry, let me just clarify that. Unlike a public library, Greg, we have the ability to choose our collection that best supports our curriculum. So whereas, as an example, in a public library, and again, this is an extreme example, you can go view pornography on their computers because it is a public library. I would argue we can't do that in our library. Why? Because we're a school library. It doesn't conform to our curriculum. So that's the main distinction. And again, the Bill of Rights, in terms of the ALA and things of that nature, allow for the freedom of access to the books. And again, I'm not saying that we don't allow any access or restrict the access to our views, or I'm sorry, our books within the collection. I'm saying is we have to evaluate does the collection meet the curriculum needs that we're going after. That's what I'm saying, which is our responsibility to do.
Right. So sorry, Madam President, may I continue?
Sure. I'll jump in at some point.
Okay. Thank you. So what I'm going to say to that is absolutely, we already talked about how there is a review process for the materials. They don't come in without any consideration. They are given careful consideration. As to whether or not we should review in relation to how the stacks support our curriculum, the courts have said there is a distinction between the limitations we may put on materials when supporting a curriculum. We have curriculum objections. We have things of that nature. But when those same materials, if we had same set of materials, can I object to them being in the curriculum and have an alternative? Yes. But we cannot take those out of our stacks, those same things, because, and Lori referenced this earlier, it's a place of voluntary inquiry. Okay? So I'm again going to dismiss that there is no review going on at all. That's not what we're talking about here. But in terms of access and First Amendment rights, it's clear where we stand for our libraries.
Sorry, Greg, maybe just to support your point to a degree, in the finding of the court in that opinion really went down to say it's the age appropriateness of it. So if we're saying that the vulgarity is age appropriate across our section, and that's where they make a clear distinction of the line of where we want to draw, it comes down to age appropriate. If you're telling me a kindergartner should see a man, getting flogged and someone, defecating on them, and that's appropriate, okay, but it's not necessarily age appropriate. So the court made a clear distinction of what they were looking at within that realm in that argument. And it's the Tinker case you're talking about.
Sorry, I know I wasn't talking about the Tinker case, but thank you. And I appreciate if we wouldn't stand up straw man arguments. Nobody was suggesting those things that you did. Okay, so.
The first thing when we look at this library policy, the first statement says in Policy 6:230 Library Media Program that the superintendent or designee shall manage the district's library media program to comply with state law, State Board of Education, Illinois State Board of Education rules, and the following standards, right? And so we have media specialists in our district all have, I believe, a master's degree, correct? Mm-hmm. They are highly qualified, and that first statement in our policy is something definitely that as a board, that we have to really go by the guidelines in our policy, and this piece does go to our superintendent to make sure that these are being complied. So if nothing illegal is happening in our libraries, right, as far as, the books that you're talking, no illegal books or material are going to enter our library because our superintendent has to abide by these. So if you could, maybe Dr. Biden, if you could speak to this a little bit. And then also, I also feel like there's some misunderstanding of, nobody's a lawyer on this table, and that our board attorney may need to help us understand some of these nuances when it comes to legalities.
Yeah, I think as the board maybe continues to discuss this, having an attorney present would be important moving forward. Yeah, again, we hire highly qualified library media specialists, certified or with master's degrees in their area. And while the library definitely enhances and supports the curriculum, it also has in part of its vision and responsibility building a love of literature and across a diverse, broad interest of students and community. And they do an exceptional job. We are very fortunate to have that staff in place leading a very important part of each of our schools, truly a hub to our instruction. They provide professional development to our staff, but also they provide individual support for students looking for books in a variety of topics. I know there's been this is why also under the Department of Student Learning, under Becky Fitzpatrick's leadership, we've created a Library Media Center coordinator to make sure all laws are met, our collection is updated, student interests are considered, Library Media Center standards are taught, and Illinois state standards are supported for all of our curriculum areas as well. I'd like to add on for the board's understanding that I know there's been some questions to the board about, what if a parent feels that, materials, for example, these objections that we received from 8 families. I want to remind the board that a library, in terms of checking out materials, is a choice environment where students choose their selections. Parents can do what I think are 3 following things. They can talk to their student and say, hey, in our family, this is an important belief of ours or something we want you to know, and we don't want you to check out this title. So they can always talk to their student. They can also say to their student, hey, we'd like you to, anything you check out, please bring home. Mom and Dad want to review those books before you read them. They also can say to their student, I'd like access to your library account so I can monitor what you're checking out as you do that. So just a reminder that those options are there for parents who don't want their child to check out the books maybe that Rich referenced, or any other book that any parent for whatever reason might not want their child to check out. They do have that parental ability working with their child to be involved in that part of a child's choice of books.
I do have one question, sorry.
Yes, Greg.
So
yeah, Chad.
I mean, whatever. Based on that lawyer conversation, so it makes a lot of sense from my perspective. I understand, like, these books, again, we can't talk about censoring books, to everybody's point. The reality, this is not about censoring these books, right? The intention of the library is to spur people to do their interests and find that out. But my point would be really to the fact, like you said, it's a parent's, at the end of the day, yes, these are minors, and parents have a choice to say, I don't want my kids to see certain content, I don't want my kids to see certain things. And honestly, that's really with this policy, I think that's where, for me, where this needs to go. Because to your point, I've talked to a 6th grader and told them, hey, don't go get this. What are they going to do? They're going to go get it. Let's just be realistic, right? I'm just trying to be honest. Like, you can tell your kids all you want, but the reality of it is they're still going to do things. So as a parent, if they want to opt out and say, hey, I don't want my kids to check out these books, right? Because as you said, it's just in the last few years, the objections keep going up. I don't see this slowing down. I see these growing. And instead of creating a whole committee to review and read and everything else like that, my mindset is, hey, like, give the parents the opportunity to say, if I'm going to object to a book, it's on the parent to go find the book, what they object to, what they want. Because again, I view this as, hey, as a parent, I choose the movies my kids see, I choose everything my kids get to do, and so when they get to go to school, why can't we just put into this policy something that says parents have the right, because right, this is back to the parents, because as you said, Greg, it's a public library, but parents, if they even have the public library, you can't check out an R-rated movie if I'm under this certain age, right? I, as a parent, have to check it out if my kids want to see it. So it's back to that same situation. We have to give the parents, I'm not saying that I'm object, because I think if we just say, hey, put this objective policy here and all they do is object, we're just going to continue to see this rolling in. My perspective is, why not put in a policy that parents have the right to, I don't want my kids these particular books, let them list it, and then if they go to check it out, it's going to be denied. I mean, not ideal, I get it, but that's a conversation between the parents and the child, and I get that, you know, we're trying to, you know, would I let my daughter or kids read some of these books? I don't know, I haven't read them, but I know when I was, you know, my kids were younger, we were reading the books together. I mean, there are always going to be books that people say, oh, I object to Harry Potter because it talks about wizards and witches and other things like that, right? I mean, I'll go back to what I remember reading as a kid. I read Dungeons and Dragons, and that was supposed to be the worst thing in the world. Let's be realistic here. People have to have access to books. They have to be able to read them. And then parents have to have, as a parent, that's your job. I'm not trying to be mean, but your job is to be a parent. You need to know what your kids are reading. You need to ask those questions. And then we, as a school district, have to give them the access to say, hey, I do not want them to see that, or I do. That's it. I don't think we need to remove the books, create a committee to review them, because at the end of the day, there's how many books that get released every single day? I can only read so many books a day or a year. I don't want to create an extra cost, because we talk about costs to do all this. It just creates so much more. To me, let's talk about the policy and say, hey, what can we put in there? If the parents who want to obviously have objections to certain things, let them do that. Let them do the research, let them find that out. And at the end of the day, because again, there are books out there that some people will never read, and there's some people like, okay, that's good, kids need to understand it. It's all about perspective, and I don't want to turn this into, let's remove these books, let's do that. Let's just talk about the policy and how we give the parents the rights to object for the kids to read or not read based on that, so.
Thank you, Chad, for that. I have a few more comments, but before I speak, I want to see if any of my other colleagues, Gina, Scott, O'Brien, would like to chime in.
Madam President?
Go ahead, Gina.
So we're really in kind of a sticky wicket area as it relates to intellectual freedom, equitable access to library media versus censorship. And I think we really have to find a process by which we can allow for our community and our community members to challenge and feel and receive support for the student population, to Chad's point, on what they do or don't have access to from a parent's perspective and a parent's right, without necessarily, and this is where we go back to, should there be a lawyer at the table, while balancing that equitable access to library and media, to allow for intellectual freedoms, right, which kind of sums up a whole bunch of stuff in the whole Library Bill of Rights. I think it's more about the process and the governance by which we allow such access to be had while keeping the safety of our student population at the forefront, which goes back to the whole conversation about the cybersecurity. And if they're reading electronically now, right, as things change in the world, they're not necessarily coming home with the book so that mom and dad can take it out of the bag and go, oh, I don't think we're going to read this, or, oh, hey, let's do this together, as often as they might be sitting on a computer and doing an electronic read of a book. And there are lots of books today that have the links, and we bring in the cyber risk. and it's not one book or two books. And it's books that are not necessarily even questioned. It's also the access to, I'm going to go media here for a second, right? The apps that the teachers recommend for our students to use, right? When we're talking about the governance of all of this, and we want to look at the safety of it, I think we have to come at it from the various bases for which we can actually affect the governance. So the cyber safety is going to be my primary kind of like baton that I want to carry right now. And that includes simple applications like math applications, right? We're inconsistent, all the teachers have great ideas, and they use their freedoms to be able to bring different things to the table. I think the governance for this board around media is going to have to kind of change with the times. So I think that's got to be something we think about. I think we also have to have a process by which we allow parents and community to challenge the support of the various intellectual freedoms and the equitable information. And whether or not that's what Chad suggests, and we go in with the exception forms, or we go in with a process that says, you know, person A, my child, person A, cannot check out A, B, C, D, E type content. And then how are we going to manage that? Because to Chad's point, as soon as you tell a kid no, they like flock to it, right? And there's no ability as a parent or in a governing board, let alone a library specialist, to be able to prevent Scott from checking out a book and handing it to Gina because I want to read it and I'm on the list that says I can't have it, right?
And that will not, no matter what we do.
Exactly, right? So we go into this area of reasonableness, right? What is reasonable for us to be able to bring into our governance, to bring our community together and feel supported on their ability to, and rightfully, their ability to challenge, and is that process robust enough? And then how are we protecting the back end as media expands into areas that are truly getting more and more dangerous every day? And that's the part that I think is the robust conversation that we have to think about at the governance of the board. Book objections are going to happen. I support a lot of the book objections that I've seen. That is operational, and the operational team needs to identify, address in whatever capacity needs to be addressed, but we have to give you the support around the governance. That's the robust conversation we need to continue to pursue.
Thank you, Gina. I have a question to add on to what Gina's saying. Dr. Bryan, on the policy 6230, bullet number 4, does that include what Gina is talking about already, right? It says the advice of an individual who is qualified according to ISBE rule of sort regarding the overall direction of the program, including the selection and organization of materials, provision of instruction in information and technology literacy. So I believe when you talk about library media program, and our esteemed educators have left, but when we're talking about library media program, what are we talking about? Are we just talking about books?
No, every kind of resource in the library. Now, Gina was referencing Thank you. We do have curriculum content, media policy that we could discuss at a separate time. But when we talk about resources in the library media program, it's in all formats that you can access through the library.
Including ebooks?
Yes.
Okay. I did say I'd let my other colleagues chime in before I did. Scott or Brian, anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think some legal, our policy compared to the 214, 214 specifically states or includes the American Library Association Bill of Rights. Ours does not reference that. So getting back to that conversation between are we a public library or are we, I think maybe some clear guidance on that is that we are a public school, but that doesn't mean anybody can walk in here. It's not a public facility. Anybody can go into the public library, and so I'd like some legal guidance on that to see where we stand and what we can do to govern and how we can govern effectively with the material that's in our possession.
Brian?
No, I'm good. This is an informational item. This is a first reading. We were also handed some material without prior knowledge that I may or may not choose to look at, so I have nothing to add at this point.
Thank you, Brian.
I just want to point out, I think it would be a good read, because I think Lori did provide this in the District 214 one. I do believe that was in the policy originally. I do think it's when we go back to review this, I think it's interesting, because if you do read in here, they do add on some additional, like.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just they add some additional information be intended for young adult audience. Obviously, the high school is much different, but they're incorporating exhibit high degree of potential user appeal, right? So they're talking about this, but then obviously they do put it in here, despite careful selection library, you can qualify professional, they allow you to have consent, parents to, say that they don't want that to read that. So they do give that option. So I think it's an important thing that we do take a look at this. But to Scott's point, I think if legally, as long as we're not going to violate anybody's rights, I think it's important to look at, because I think at the end of the day, again, I remind everybody they're still minors, right? And they still have rights, but it's then parents ultimately have the right to say things too. So that's what I think we have to be confident of. Like, listen, I'm going to say it over again. You parent the way you parent. I can't tell you how to parent. I don't want you to tell me how to parent. But I do want the right to be able to say something if I don't like what's happening within the school, and if I don't want my kids to read certain things. I think we need to at least give the parents that opportunity.
And Lori, could you help me understand what Chad just brought up? And I definitely, as a parent of 4 children, I'm all about the parenting rights. So could you tell me, do parents have rights to object?
Yeah, so, a few things on that, right? Right now, we already have an objection process, right? So that is in place that parents have. We also have a uniform grievance policy that community members can also utilize to object for a variety of things. Related to the library, again, what we currently have is that a parent can, like I know we all say, I'm going to tell my child, you can't check that out, and they're going to go check it out. Well, that's a parenting family topic, right? That's a conversation, right? I will tell my children something they can't do. They go do it. We're going to address that at home, right? We can tell a child, I know we've had a parent present to the board that she always has her children bring the books home. She reviews them before they read them as a family. And again, a parent can also say to their child, I need your login and, to your library account, and I can monitor what you are checking out. In addition to that, kind of what Chad is referencing from 214 that they added this summer is in their policy now, a parent, I can go to my school librarian in 214 and say, I don't want my daughter checking out the following title of books from your library. And that can be put on a child's library account. And then when that student goes to, I would imagine 214 has self-checkout, just like we do all the way down to early childhood. When that student goes to scan and check out that book, it beeps or it somehow notifies the librarian that they need to stop, and then they need to go see the adult, and the adult would say, this is a material you're not able to check out, please go choose something else. That's the way it works in District 214. My understanding is, so they have less than 10 families across the district that have submitted a list of titles that they don't want their individual children to check out. The system is not 100% dependable, right? They've had some quirks where it didn't alarm somebody, so we'd have to think about a liability of something like that. But that's what Chad is kind of referencing by that part of their policy. But again, our parents there are many ways for people they always have the right to object, but they also have the right to limit what their child checks out through conversations directly parent to child.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Rich, did you want to say something?
So maybe kind of circulating through that, I handed out some documents. Obviously, people have already referenced the D214 policy on this particular subject, but I did also send out, I took the liberty of, and I want to say this is draft, it's an alternative, it's not been legally reviewed, all those types of things, of really some changes to our policy that might be, again, to give us pause or think about. But in the conversation here, I would maybe suggest that there's 4 things that we should be looking at within the policy type thing. And, the first one is really about the criteria of the types of resources that we're utilizing, right? And bear with me here, because I kind of started looking at cross-referencing a lot of our areas here. In policy 680, we're responsible for teaching about our curriculum. In it specifically states that we are not tolerant of profanity. Okay, so just looking at that. Policy 6210 on instructions, and says all our instructions and materials will enrich and support the curriculum, be accurate and unbiased way that through cultural diversities of really the American population. No movie or movie excerpt above a G level. So again, it's starting to look at particular areas there. So one of the areas I think we need to evaluate within this is set up a series of criteria. And I try to jot some down here just to start that conversation going within that piece. Maybe it's too extreme, maybe it's not too extreme. The second area that I do think, and my thought on this has really evolved specifically around some of the material that Greg has recently shared with the board. When I first started thinking more about this in preparation for the meeting here, I thought maybe we need a way to rate our books, right? Similar to the way the movies do in TVs. You got the American Movie Association, you got the TV Association, and really so that we have the ability to make sure that the books align with our educational philosophy. But a lot of the material that Greg shared with us really aligns around, that's tough to do, because then you're approaching, even as Gina had pointed out, the lines of censorship. And that's, I want to be clear, that is not what I'm about. I'm going to be here, touting up the storm that everyone has a right, because I say it a lot, but everyone has a right to speak their minds and be open. I mean, that's what we're all about. So there's got to be some way that, maybe the way District 214, or maybe it's evolved into the criteria, because we have such a strong link to our curriculum, right? Maybe as an extreme example, there isn't, I'm going to go out on a limb here, there aren't books about how to tear apart a 429 Cobra jet. And I agree, there should be, but there probably isn't, because it doesn't align with our curriculum. It'll be great reading, right? And it'll be fun, but not for everyone, because it doesn't align to our curriculum. So there's got to be a way to mix that particular piece in there. And then I thought really that we probably should have a standing committee and this one could fit a lot of our objectives, right? We have a board governance framework to really make sure that we're looking at all the curriculums. But also, we have policy 895, parental involvement, right? It specifically calls out how we want to involve our parents into everything there. We do have policy 840, which is about our community involvement, where we actually want to go out and draw in the community into this. So why couldn't we have a standing committee that can read all the books? I mean, we have all these book clubs and things of that nature that prepare, not only ensure that we've looked at it, aligns with our philosophy, but that gives the opportunity for the community. Again, we are here for the community, not the other way around or anything of that nature. We have to align with the community so the community can weigh in on, is this appropriate, does it align with our curriculum, but more so really have parents prepared for when those questions come up, because books are to facilitate ideas and they're going to align on different conversations. And half the time, just having the conversation is paramount into anything that we do. And the fourth area we've chimed in on a little bit is the ability to object. It's not about minimizing the ability to have open dialogue or talk about something, but it's really about the ability to have parents be involved. A lot of times we use a reference in parental loco or whatever, in loco parentis. The challenge that we have in a lot of these examples is that the parent isn't in our school library that is monitoring what the child is doing or where they're going. And so if we have the ability, or even the way to, which I think technology-wise we do, is to say, hey, little Billy shouldn't have these kinds of books, then we should be able to provide that means to them. The other challenge with that, though, it poses another challenge is, we have 109,000 books. That's a lot to go through and say and provide access to. So which parents know what books that are available within there? So those are really the four things that I think from a governance standpoint we need to really talk through and think about. I try to put some words and thoughts around, but when you look at my red lines, there's, about those four areas are really outlined in that area. Again, it needs a lot of discussion, a lot of work to refine that.
Earlier, before this meeting, as my board colleagues know, we had a policy committee meeting, and our attorney was actually present at the policy committee meeting. And it's really important. He went through the process and procedures of how policy goes from press and becomes policy. And it's very important in this aspect that when we have ideas like this, of course, we can always voice our ideas, but then we delegate, as effective board governance tells us, we delegate and communicate our interest or what we're thinking to our superintendent to work with the attorney to kind of come up with the correct language and so forth. And so at this point, I think this discussion can keep going. I have a couple of closing thoughts here, but then, okay, we have two more, okay. But after the three of us speak, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to ask Dr. Bine what direction she needs from us in order to kind of close the loop on this. But I want to say, 100%, as a parent, I feel very strongly that a parent does have the right, it should always have the right, and a parent always has to have that right to, when a child goes, I like the ideas from our librarians and from Dr. Bine, the educators in our building, that when a child does bring a book home, or to have some kind of system to say, hey, to my little son Khalil, hey, if you're going to check out a book, according to, I don't want you to check out this book or that book, that is a parent's right. We must always have the right. But that conversation has to happen at home, and it's something called parenting, which is actually very difficult nowadays in the in this multimedia age with social media and so forth. Our jobs as parents, whoever is a parent in this room, our job is extremely challenging and very difficult, and we have to step up to the plate, right? And it's no easy feat, I can tell you that, and you know this already. I'm really concerned. I did speak to my colleagues in District 214, and I am really concerned for our district from a liability standpoint as far as this, putting that responsibility back on the schools. The schools have a lot of responsibilities, right? To put that responsibility back on the school to say, hey, now could you make sure that little Khalil doesn't check out this, and this book. I think that's putting it back on the school where it's something that the parent should really take charge of. And then I also am concerned that that aspect of, how does that social emotionally make the child feel? So the child goes up to the checkout lane, and the child is told by a librarian who's supposed to be the safe educator to say, hey, actually you can't check out this book. So that's one thing of how does the child feel. And then secondly, that child can check out that book off the shelves, read it during library time, and it's quite a long period of time, and have all the content as it is anyway. So what does it make sense to have that block piece that may have technology issues with it? And again, I heard Chad say there's a rising number of families. We have to truly take into consideration that we are a district, we are a community of about 70,000 people in Arlington Heights, right? We have 8 families, and every family's rights are extremely important. Every family and every parent's rights are extremely important. But when we say a rising number of objections, we're talking about 8 families. And so we have to kind of keep all this in perspective as to when we talk about resources, our library resources, our educators, and the task, the mandate they have of educating each child, are we going to put this back onto the schools to say, you take care of this as well? So those are my concerns, and I wanted to be sure I outlined them. Gina?
So
go ahead.
If you want to, my topic changes in a very different direction. So if there are more comments around this, I'd rather finish those, because then
Okay.
I have a completely different direction.
Thanks, Gina. Greg?
Madam President, and thank you, Gina. Yeah, thank you, Anisha, you spoke eloquently. I wanted to speak to it. You know, our library and the libraries and the District 214 hold up the Library Bill of Rights from ALA as a guiding document. And I'll point out the point 5 on that Bill of Rights is a person's right to use a library should not be denied or abridged because of origin, age, background, or views. And so when we talk about, I mean, Chad, I couldn't agree with you more that parenting, that's your job. That's your job. So I'm going to express great affinity with that statement. But I'm going to also express affinity with Anisha's statement that it is not our library's place when this is a place that is, we talked about it earlier, for free inquiry, where we want access to a diverse range of library resources and services. And now, is it appropriate, whether or not it's possible, is it appropriate now that, well, we're going to start accepting those documents on an individual basis and make the school, as you said, responsible for it. And I don't think that conforms at all with the Library Bill of Rights, and I'm not the only one that says that, so does the ALA. And I think we have to go back to those larger issues. It doesn't matter if it's possible. And I respect that the D214 board put that in their policy. That's their decision at their board table. And I just want to address something as a middle school educator. I know that was provided as a reference, as something to look at. But I want to be careful that we don't fall into the trap is because the high school is doing it, okay? We can make our own decisions here at this table. And I think when we look at our foundational values in terms of what we want for our libraries, we should not be in the business of doing that at all. Because we want to fall back to the idea of censorship. We're not about censorship. Well, guess what? This isn't the movies. There isn't a big bad guy that comes in and lays down censorship. It's incremental, it's small, and it happens, and that's how it happens, in ways you can't even imagine. And all of a sudden, now we're talking about, to your point, is it 8? But now we have a range of exceptions. And now are we really educating our kids for a pluralistic society or just the society that you would like to see? Well, to everybody's point here, we all agree how you parent your kids and what works in your home, that's your business. But that's not what we're discussing here. We're discussing what our libraries should do.
Thank you, Greg. Gina, are you going to pivot for us?
Related to this topic, understand what folks have talked about, and I want to go back to, again, as a counterpoint to what you said when you said the 8 families, right? And we talked about a presentation about, lemons for love and things of that nature, and in it, it said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So right there, just by looking at that, if there's a group of family members that are, speaking in one behalf, their voice should still be heard and not be minimized.
100%.
Not be minimized. And again, because the same thought process that you're just putting in there is the same thing that happened to Martin Luther King, way back when. And again, I'm not saying that, but think of the same thought process of, hey, it's only this many people. Let's look at the larger context of what's being said there. Because I'm so passionate about everyone needs a voice. We need to be able to hear folks in terms of what they're saying. At the end of the day, and looking at this, we could probably be here all night debating it, but I think it goes back to what you were saying, Anisha. What does, I pointed out 4 areas that I think if if Lori can evaluate, look at what D214 is doing, what we're doing, maybe some points that we've had in the discussion here so that we can move forward into seeing something to come fruition to this. That I think would be important.
Okay. Gina, can I close this out because you're going to pivot?
I want to pivot, but I want to pivot within commentary that's occurred here.
Okay.
So
I wanted to clarify a point. No, definitely every single person's voice is really important in this community, including, when we're talking about, because we talk about data and statistics, right? So when we talk about 8 families, right, those 8 families, they 100% should implement their right. They have a right to object, and that right is there, as our superintendent has explained to us. So every family's rights are very important, so nobody should be negated. And I know, Rich, you've mentioned it before, the Martin Luther King comment has come up a second time. I don't know, it just, the last time I heard this comment, and you had made it, there's something about that statement and that reference, I still can't make the connection to what we're talking about. So I don't have a response right now, but for some reason it doesn't sit well with me, so I just want to be sure I said it to you.
So, Dr. Budd, this is actually kind of an action item for you. So I will not pretend to know word for word the content of absolutely every policy across our district, but Rich cited a couple of snippets whereby I think the full context should go to legal review to ensure that we do not have conflicts within our own policies. And if we could do that with some of the references that he has brought forth just to avoid liability, I think that that would be extremely helpful. And I didn't write down the numbers, Rich, so if you could, okay, good. So if we could just run that past our lawyers and ensure that we don't have governance conflicts, that would be very much appreciated.
Madam President?
Thanks, Gina. Yes, Greg?
I'm sorry, I'm going to hold that comment.
Okay.
I just have one comment.
Yes, Chad.
One more. I just want to say thank you. I know that I'm the one who asked for this. I think it's an important conversation to have, whether we all agree or not, and on certain pieces of it, but I think it's an important conversation because at the end of the day, right, I just want to make sure that we are all aware that, hey, to Gina's point, there's so much more than just books anymore, right? It's all these other pieces of the media we need to make sure of. I think it's important, as Rich said, like, yes, it's 8 people, but I do think we do, having this conversation just shows that we are listening, right? That's all, and that's, whether we agree and we change the policy, I don't care from a perspective of like, I'm not going to sit here and fight over I want to make sure that we have voices heard. I want to make sure the policy gets reflected with what I think, and if I lose, I lose. I mean, that's the way it's going to go. But I just want to say thank you. That's my biggest thing to the group, because I know it's not an easy conversation. I know there's a lot of things out there about this, but I think it's an important conversation because, to your point, Greg, I don't want to censor anybody, right? I want my kids to see what they can and learn and do everything else like that. But again, I also know that there's other parents who say they don't want to see that, and that's just my whole point. Like, we have to look at it from a different angle, from that perspective, and say that maybe there's a way to help them because that's the way they want to view it. But that's all I want to say is thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chad. I see a green light. Go ahead, my friend Rich.
Sorry, going off of what Chad's saying, what I want to also maybe point out, and I think it's what all of us think here is this in no way is any reflection other than how important we think the LMCs are to us. So this does not reflect any way but positive on our LMC directors, the staff, the volunteers that are working there, because all those things that you point out in your slides are excellent. There are so many schools in our district that can't even put a candle to what you guys do collectively for all of us. So do not think of our debate here anything but how much we value that whole process and what the LMC means to the organization.
Thank you. And in saying that, like we've already said this, right, that I think when we value our educators and their expertise, it's helpful to fall back and lean on their expertise in making these decisions for our students. And as a public school and a public school library, we support every single child in our school building. So definitely a robust conversation, and always important to have, that's why I always think this is a gem, because our board has diversity of thought. And so thank you to my colleagues for this conversation. I'll now turn to Dr. Bine to say, Dr. Bine, what direction do you need from us?
Well, here's what I'm thinking, hearing the conversation. And so I just want to put this out there and see if this works for the board. I'm thinking we, of course, continue this conversation. But to do that I bring you some legal perspectives, so bring an attorney along with, and also that I would encourage us to kind of broaden the conversation, like Gina referenced and Rich referenced on, are there other policies that are similar or could be connected, right? So that you get a review that those policies, do they impact each other or not? And it wouldn't be the next, are we in January 10th? It wouldn't be the next January meeting. We would need more time. But one of the February meetings, I think we can kind of restructure this for the board. And I don't even know that it would be done in one more meeting, but to break it down into some areas of discussion points that maybe the boards could agree on different parts of it step by step.
And does the board agree that this is a conversation that we should have as a whole board? But I know you have kind of given responsibility to a policy committee. Would you like us to kind of do a screening with the attorney, or do you think this is a full board conversation, knowing that any board member can attend the policy committee meeting as well? So I am, as a board president, looking at efficiency to make sure that that our staff and administrators and all of us on this board are able to effectively move the business of the district.
Yeah, I would just jump on that might be a really good idea, to go to the policy committee, have them put the work in with the attorney first, bring then to the full board what those recommendations are and what questions still remain.
Yeah.
A straw poll?
I would recommend that we do a report out.
Okay.
I would ask though, if that policy meeting falls at some of the standard times just because of work schedules, I will like to attend that one. So it would be nice if we were going to do that. I would argue let's have it on a later date or a different time. So that's like, right, just because it's,
sure.
I will never make it because
yeah,
I got to work. So
yeah.
Unfortunately.
Good point, Chad. Yes, we all have day jobs, so for sure, to make it where it's an accessible time. Yeah.
It's a committee of the whole meeting. I don't know necessarily want to say, I mean, or whatever, one of those, right? It's a special board meeting that we almost have to have because if we're going to get the lawyer to come and we're going to do all that. And it's optional for all board members, but I think you do it that way, you know, we can schedule it at 7 o'clock at night or whatever times that I can make it.
So
Well, we have the process, we have the policy committee.
Right.
It's just
We can
making
schedule
it a
the time.
time.
Right, just schedule
We
the
don't
time.
need a committee of the whole meeting.
Absolutely.
okay, so policy committee at a time that works better after work hours.
Not board meeting night.
Yep.
And not board meeting. So is that, I want to be sure that's what we all want?
Madam President, yeah, I want to offer a differing viewpoint. I think we're working ourselves into a committee of the whole meeting that's not a committee of the whole meeting. So I think there's public interest in this. I think there's a lot of vested interest around this table, and not that the policy committee can't, but we just had a meeting in policy committee where we could decide to kick up to the full board a topic that's too hot for us to just take on as the three of us. And I would offer that this is a prime example of that. So I'm all for efficiency, but again, I think we're working ourselves into a committee of the whole anyway. Okay. So whether it's that or another board meeting, I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, for committee of the whole.
So I was going to share this a little bit later. Dr. Mann, do you think it's okay for me to share our summary of our conversation from policy committee now? As far as kicking up the conversation piece, or should I bring it up at the first reading?
I think you could, I think I would wait till the first reading, and we could always come back to it. At this point, we're looking at either a policy committee meeting or a committee of the whole meeting, right?
Or what I think I heard Greg say is a regular board, discuss it at a regular board meeting.
Dr. Bine talked about, piecing it out, so it's not like we'll have a holistic discussion. And actually, it's a very reasonable suggestion because there's a lot of tentacles to this, this discussion. So if we could, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We just take bites at a time. If we were to look at doing it at a regular.
At a regular.
I wouldn't suggest a holistic discussion at all.
Sorry, Greg, I'm confused. Are you saying do a committee of the whole, or so parse it out into the next, 7 sessions or something like that?
One of those two, I'll be optimistic that it's less than 7.
So at this point, we have at the table kind of 2 ideas I'm hearing. One, to just continue with what Dr. Bine had suggested. And then the second one is to have a committee of the whole. Dr. Biden, what would be best for you?
There's pros and cons for both from a board perspective, right? If you're doing a committee of whole, that's the whole board. Adding a meeting, it will be very lengthy if we're going to try to do it in one committee of the whole board meeting, right? So we can definitely do that, but that will be a very long meeting. It's unlikely we would get through all that we would need to get to. If we give it back to the policy committee to review and create that policy committee meeting at 7 p.m. or on the weekend or whatever works for those who would want to attend, I think the policy committee will take several meetings as well to go through that, right? So both of those are great options. We just need to know it's going to be too much to do in one sitting. So I still think those are both great options. It's just a lot to do in one sitting. Whereas because we have so much interest more than the policy committee, and like Greg said, it is what we would consider kind of a very important topic to the board. We can add it on to future board agendas, a couple meetings in February, maybe a couple meetings in March, and hopefully have it wrapped up at that point. So I don't really have a preference. I just want the board to be aware that it's a big topic. So doing a committee of the whole meeting, I'm thinking you're looking at a 4+ hour meeting, and you may not get through it at that time.
Madam President.
Yes, Gina.
I believe that we agreed from a governance perspective to put the policy committee in place in order to abate some of this and to bring in others to do some of this, and this was a task they were assigned to do. I'd like to see I'd like to see the policy committee pick up the heavy lifting and then report back to the board. And if there are topics that are, I believe Greg called them hot topics, that need to be escalated, then
You're using the words the policy committee just used, so he's like, wow, was she in the meeting?
I wasn't in the meeting. But then we escalate and we use the board governance for that.
Okay. So maybe when we get to the policy part, this conversation might come back up.
Probably a good idea to refer it back, to hold on that, any guidance, and then come back to
Okay. Okay, so at this
Dr.
point,
Madam President.
yes.
So maybe we're going to do this. Can you summarize where we're at now?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to table this, if that's okay. I'm going to table this decision of the guidance for the library media program until the next agenda item, which will kind of answer the questions possibly of when I summarize the policy committee portion of it. Okay, so I'm tabling it for now, and then we'll come back to it.
Right.
Yeah. So
Madam President, before we move on, you mentioned we have day jobs.
Yes.
As of January 1st, day job turned into a night job, so I have to respectfully ask to be excused to go to work.
No, thank you, Scott, for letting us know earlier, and go keep our streets safe. Okay, thank you. We'll now move forward to business and finance. It's an information discussion item. We're in the resolution directing the Cook County Clerk to abate the increase in the 2022 real estate tax levy due to Section 18233 of the Property Tax Code 35 ILCS and the rest of the numbers there. And this item, Ms. Malik.
Thank you. As mentioned at the December meeting of the property tax, or in the discussion topic of the property tax levy, a law was passed effective with the 2021 levy that the county clerk would automatically add to the real estate tax extension for taxing districts an amount equivalent to the refund that can be recaptured, refunds that were issued through the prior calendar year. In 2021 was the only year, it's an annual decision the board can make in terms of, actually the decision the board can make is to choose not to accept that amount, because without any action on the part of the board, it will become automatic and the county clerk will do it. In 2021, we recaptured just over $500,000. When I presented the 5-year forecast early last year, I had shared with the board at that time, I did not project or include in the projections that revenue, that additional recapture revenue, would continue in future years. So the 5-year forecast that you've seen most recently continued to show that we would incur those refunds effective with the 2022 levy. Back in December, we hadn't been aware of the amount at the December board meeting of those refunds. That amount was released later. It's $827,000. So at this point, if the board would choose to not accept those dollars, the board has to take action on passing a resolution that we would then send to the county clerk to ensure that those additional dollars are not included on our tax extension and therefore in the tax bill of our community. Based on the fact that as I mentioned, I did not anticipate accessing these revenues with the 2022 levy, and additionally, the fact that our community just approved a large tax increase to support our full-day kindergarten program, I would suggest that it would be our recommendation that the board do go ahead and abate this so that it's not an additional tax burden on our community. If the board chooses to do so, then I would bring this back for action at the next meeting.
Thank you, Stacy. So did you need direction from us right now? Yeah, question, comment, and I think it's great that we're putting money back into folks' pockets. I love hearing that.
Stacy will bring the resolution to the next meeting.
Okay.
It's one of few times that I get to bring something that most people would be happy about.
Yeah. No, we would love to put money back into our community's pockets. Thank you, Stacy, for that recommendation. The next item we have here is a superintendent's report and the Freedom of Information Act report from Dr. Bine.
Thank you. As usual, the board has the list of Freedom of Information Act requests we've received since the last meeting, and the date on which we've responded to each of those.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bine. Okay, now we'll be going over the first reading of policies. Press 110. Now, before I do that, I wanted to give an opportunity for the policy committee to get the full board's input, okay? Today, as I said, our attorney was present. He has a lot of expertise in helping boards govern effectively through a policy committee and went through the policy adoption process with us. and there were a couple of items that we needed more guidance on. Instead of me talking through this, I may give this to Greg or Rich, if you'd like to go over the 3 options that he suggested. Would you like to go over, summarize what the attorney said, or would you like me to do it?
I'm happy to.
I'm defer to Dr. Bine, if you don't mind.
So the policy committee was talking about procedures of the policy committee and what's the most effective and best way to do their work in support of the board. And so there was a 2-part option or a 3-part option that we didn't have full agreement on. We wanted to bring to the board for your perspective. The 2-part option is the policy committee would review policies, and step 1, bring any policies to the board that they recommend be approved, right? And the second part being if there was a large topic that was a hot topic, they would go ahead and elevate it straight to the board, saying we need input from you before we go back as a policy committee to work through this. So, and as a part of that, in bringing a recommendation or elevating, in bringing a recommendation to the board, that would take a majority of the policy committee to say this is what we want to do. So basically 2 out of 3 people would say we want to recommend option A as the policy for the board. And during that, when the board reviewed that policy, the individual of the policy committee who didn't agree, or any board member, would say, hey, I have comments on this, I'd like to talk about this, I don't agree with that. So again, in that situation, the policy committee is only doing recommendations or elevating, but you would know that as a part of the recommendations, there might be a person on the policy committee who doesn't agree with those, and they would bring that up during discussion. Sorry?
No, sorry, go ahead.
The other option, so this is where the policy committee is trying to decide, has 3 options. Again, they elevate, they recommend only when all 3 of them agree to recommend, and a third thing would be to bring policies that the policy committee doesn't all 3 agree on under a separate category, whatever we call that. Again, the ultimate impact, the ultimate procedure happens either way, right? At any time, any board member, policy committee or non-policy committee can say, hey, I'd like to talk about, even if the policy committee, all 3 of them recommend it, you could still say, I want to talk about this more, I don't agree with that, right? Ultimately, only the full board makes the decision on adopting or approving a policy. So really the difference is, do you want it to come to you as a recommendation when 2 out of the 3 agree on it, or do you want it to only come to you as a recommendation when 3 out of 3? And if only 2 of 3, that it comes under a different category.
Excuse me, Madam President, small clarification.
Yes, Greg.
Is only this, in either case, a recommendation doesn't mean a change, right? It just means it could be, there's nothing here except added commas and a few legal references. So it just means that we're moving it forward under our recommendation, but that's all.
And that, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And at every point, of course, that's the whole point of the policy committee. And again, it'll go back to what Gina was kind of alluding to and Brian was alluding to, right? We've delegated responsibility to a policy committee so that we can efficiently kind of move on and continue the work of the district. So in that line, having kind of recommendation from the policy committee and kind of defining what consensus means, right? Consensus being majority consensus, meaning 2 out of 3 people, being majority consensus, or consensus being, does a recommendation only come if it's like all 3 of us? And again, this is all about efficiency. And I was going to say one last point. But of course, at any point, any individual board member, even after it's come as a recommendation, can say, hey, I have concerns about this policy. I actually want the policy committee to review, and these are my suggestions.
So adding one point of counterpoint to that is when we start looking at it, the antithesis could occur as well, and that's my concern, in that something cannot be moved forward because of the majority, right? In the policy committee, you have the idea of ideas being brought forward. A majority vote would say, hey, we don't want to bring those ideas any further, right? That's also would be based on this type of dilemma. So not only, if you're saying the only option is the majority can determine something, that means the majority can determine not to do something, meaning not even to allow something to move forward, right? Because that's the opposite. And therefore, that's where I was thinking that you have the three. Either we recommend 100% that, hey, all three of us, policy committee is 100% aligned toward this change. There's a hot topic, we got to kick it up. 6-230 is a good example. We kicked that up before early on. Yeah, we kicked that up early on, saying. And then the third one is say, hey, we need board input, right? And it could be as simple as, hey, we need 10 minutes to get clarification from the board, or it could be something else, right? That's the three options that we have. I think by limiting it to two, we limit ourselves and our flexibility. And you've heard of, in our wonderful legislature where things go to committee and they die, right? Just because of those particular pieces.
Especially this thing.
Right. And I'm not saying that would happen here. I'm not saying that, but I'm just trying to think of, we're trying to think of an isolated instance, but let's think of the ramifications of this across the board.
And if somebody could remind me who was there, what the attorney who has a lot of experience with this, what he felt was best practices in the hundreds of boards that he works with.
The attorney referenced best practice because he works with many boards on policy. He said it's nearly impossible to say that all three members are going to agree all of the time, but that in his view, best practices, the policy committee was created to bring a recommendation to the full board, and that in his experience what happens is it comes as a recommendation, whether it's 2 people or 3 people, and then again every board member, including anyone from the policy committee, could say, hey, as we're looking at this policy, I want you to know my perspective on it. I didn't agree with my colleagues, or I had concerns about this. He believes it's best practice to bring it back when there's a majority and then have the discussion.
Madam President,
Yes,
I want to seek clarification here.
yes.
At the end of the day, the policy committee is only making recommendations, so it is still the responsibility of the board and all of its members to pass changes on a policy. I think it would behoove us to see a report out of the committee so that, to Rich's point, if something were to have arisen where the majority decided not to bring it forward, that if we just put that in the notes,
Yeah.
then the board would have an ability to have kind of the visibility to what the policy committee reviewed, what the policy committee voted on for recommendations or voted against in recommendations.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it is still the responsibility. I don't sit on the policy committee, but if I have to cast a vote, and if it's my responsibility, I have to understand it.
Yeah, and remembering that the policy committee makes no votes. We're not allowed to make votes, right?
Right.
Just the recommendations.
Correct,
Yeah.
but as long as the report out includes that which was not only recommended, but that which was not recommended as part of the report out, I think we cover all of it.
Got it. Thank you, Gina. Yeah.
I like the way that was going, because that's almost like a written version of the 3 option, the second option with the 3, right? Kind of, this was really the workaround.
Well, I think I think what you're saying is it's really option 1 option 1 with 2. It's option A with 2 options, but with enough information to understand the minority, right? Just like maybe, you have a court decision, you have the majority opinion, you have the minority opinion. You can read all of it and go, oh, okay, I see, and then I'm voting on that particular piece. So you want to see the minority opinion.
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Dr. Bynum, did you get that?
Yeah, I'm clear.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah. Okay, so then if I make the conversation that we tabled, Dr. Bynum, can I go back to it now?
Yes.
The conversation that we tabled as far as that, we had said at the policy committee that if there was a hot topic that would elevate, the policy committee, it would be too, because it's a hot topic, it would elevate it to the whole board. And so, now that is our process, right? We should always, for efficiency's sake, we stick to a process. And that is our process as a district board. And so since that is, then I think we have to go back to say, it's a hot topic and it has to be elevated to a board meeting.
Can I add to that? Because
We're sticking to the process, but okay.
No, I agree. We were kicking it back up, but I think now in this context of we have better alignment or better thought process, is it not, I think we have an opportunity here, and I know we hate sometimes saying this, but Laura, you're right about this is a large topic, but maybe if we split it out, because the key that when we kick it up, the intent of kicking it up was to get guidance, collective guidance, right? So.
And I think that's what you did tonight, right? We kicked this topic up already tonight.
Correct.
So now what?
Right. So now I'm thinking from a process standpoint, now that we've talked about it, I think maybe do we have a committee of the whole, bear with me here, where we gather information, we gather legal input, we gather this so that we can give guidance back to the policy committee and then they go from there. Because right now we're just at a conundrum of, hey, this is a large topic, which way is the board leaning in terms of how to draft the policy? So we need something as a group to get information maybe and then go back, I say go down, but go back to committee and work it through. That would just be maybe as a way to move forward with this.
I really like our board attorney and his emphasis on process. And so what I understood from our time with the board attorney today, right, always sticking to the process will help eliminate kind of wishy-washiness, possibly on my part or anybody's on our board's part. So maybe Dr. Bynes' first solution talks about it in bringing it to the whole board in little chunks, because then it's a hot topic and we're elevating it in small chunks.
And that could be an education step first, where we hear the legal perspective, things like that, and then get some questions, some clarification, and then come back to another board meeting with, okay, here's now recommendations based on that understanding.
Yeah, because otherwise I fear that if we go into policy committee, the full board may not have all the information on the hot topic. Therefore, we had that option too of elevating hot topics.
I think we can at least start with the step of let's bring in an attorney and provide information to the full board on the legal aspect of things.
And I think we already all kind of agreed that the committee meeting, while keeping to its purpose, having it on a non-board night at a time we could all meet fits our needs, as opposed to committing ourselves and our community to what could be a 4 or 5 hour committee of the whole discussion when we haven't done those other procedural things first, to me would seem wasteful.
So is the board comfortable with at least the next step being we add to probably the early February meeting that we have an attorney here, we talk about all the different policies and how they interrelate, what the legal aspects are, what our legal abilities are from what ALA says, et cetera, to make sure we're not going to do something that legally we shouldn't be doing?
Yes, for me, as if we're taking a straw poll, what are your thoughts, Chad? Are you in agreement with what Dr. Bynes is saying? If we just take a straw poll from all our board members. We'll come back to you. Okay, sorry, I put you on the spot. I didn't mean to disrespect you.
I get the perspective also of, I don't know, does the whole board want that, or do you want the policy committee to do that on your behalf?
Yeah, I was gonna say, either way, we're a thumbs up, because either way, we're doing it.
Okay,
We're doing it either way.
So right now, there's Brian, are you with what Lori's saying?
Yes.
Okay, so
Madam
that's four of us.
Madam
Greg?
President, to that point, I think the policy committee is saying we want to talk about it as a whole board.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
To be clear.
Okay, so I think that puts it.
That,
Okay, that's the majority. Gina, were you going to say anything different?
Well, I'll support the majority, but my comment might be a little contrary to it. So if there's a difference between escalating for guidance back to the board and throwing it to the board to let the board sort it out, which is the whole purpose we put the committee in place. So I would advocate that I'd like to see the committee ask for the guidance in their escalation of what they feel they're stuck on, which goes back to, here are the committee notes, here's the in favor, here's the stalemate, or whatever the answer is. What has to be escalated? And then let the board provide guidance and let the committee go back and still do its job. Now, at the same time though, I will offer, I would like to hear in either documentation, I'm happy to read it and consume it via paper, what the legality is. And I would like to ensure that from a legal perspective, we do not have conflicting policies.
Yeah.
Now, do I trust the policy committee to come back and say, we did it, we reviewed it, we're good, the lawyer says good? Absolutely. But I'd like that piece done, and I would like a formal report out on it.
Yeah. So having done a straw poll, I heard four voices say, hey, let's have the attorney here, and let's go that way. So I respect your input, and moving forward after that, we can decide what else to do, and thank you for that, trusting the policy committee. We appreciate that, right, Rich and Greg? We appreciate that comment, Gina. And, okay,
I just
so
have one
Dr. Fine, are
more
you clear?
question, sorry.
Oh, yes.
You left me off, and it's okay.
Okay. Chad, tell
So
us.
when we say we want guidance from the board, so what is it exactly? Like, I think we've had a great conversation here. I'm just using this example for the library. What the guidance is, we need legal, we need all these things. And I know I said, hey, if you're going to do it in a policy committee, I'd like to attend it, just I'd like to hear it. But if I can't attend it, or you want to do it on a different day or the same day and not have every board member, because it sounds like Gina's saying, I don't want every board member. And I agree, we should let the policy committee make that decision and guidance and move that up and say, okay, here's all the guidance I heard, here's what I know, here's the legal, here's the output, and here's what we're going to recommend in the next board meeting. So I guess the question is, do you feel like you have enough guidance to go back and do this in the board meeting, in the policy meeting of its own? I guess that's what I'm trying to make sure, because like to Gina's point, if we're going to trust the policy committee, then we need to know if you don't feel you have the guidance, then what else do you need that, like, so we can prepare either another meeting, whatever we're going to do, so we're going to give you that correct, because I want to make sure we give you the right guidance. I guess that's what I'm trying to make sure of, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Chad, for that input. I'm going to, having seen, again, I'll go back to having seen the straw poll of 4, we'll move forward with the attorney here next time. And then in future meetings, we'll come back to, hey, delegating to the policy committee again. Does that, okay? So I'm going to move on to the next agenda item of future agenda.
First reading of policy.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, now let's talk about first reading of policies. And I want to thank our audience for their patience today as well, as our goal is continued efficiency in our processes. So with first reading of policies, Dr. Vine, if you could.
So these are all from Press Edition 110. We're presenting them to the board for first review. And you have the summary of things, as well as the draft policies that, again, show anything in red that would be suggested to be deleted, anything in green that press from Illinois Association of School Boards and their legal policymakers recommend to be added. And then when there's something in blue, it's something that staff here is recommending. What I would do tonight moving forward is just highlight the ones that came in front of the policy committee where the policy committee had some questions. that's okay. And then after that, of course, if the board wants to bring up other policies, of course. But by doing it this way, I believe the first one the policy committee wanted to have some discussion on is 410, which is fiscal and business management. And again, you see in green the parts that IASB and their policy attorneys are recommended be added due to updates in law. But at the end of that policy, we put a section called Policy Committee Notes. And so this is the part that the Policy Committee was having discussion on that we wanted to bring to the board. There was a suggestion to include the phrase zero-based budgeting throughout the policy. This method is currently utilized by administration, but there was discussion about whether or not this should be put in policy, as it then dictates the type of budgeting format the board would expect. But also, again, from an administrative perspective, we consider that procedure instead of policy. But that was an area that members of the policy committee wanted to bring forward for board input.
And Dr. Bynum, could you remind me, was that, if we're going back to our processes right now, was that a majority of the policy committee?
Yeah, before we had that process. Before we had that, so.
Is before.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this current process is just if anyone at the policy committee had a topic that they wanted to move forward, this is representing that. So I don't know if.
Madam President?
Yes, Gina.
Zero-based budgeting by definition is process, not policy.
Okay.
Madam President?
Yes.
So then to clarify what we're doing this evening, we're looking for consensus, correct? We're looking for consensus for Dr. Bine so that either there's a modification of the policy, correct, or?
This is first reading.
Yeah, or at least.
I'm sorry, this is first.
Yeah, just,
My apologies.
thank you,
My
just
apologies.
discussion so that the board had a chance to discuss it. And then we would bring forward a final recommendation policy at the next meeting.
So based on what Gina said, does anybody
I
else want to
concur with Gina. That's procedural.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
So that means you don't bring it forward again.
Okay, I'll do it as it is. Okay, then the next one, so I don't lose my place here. The next one would be 5:190. And this one is teacher qualifications. Again, the policy is unchanged from IASB, just footnotes are updated. But there is a policy committee note at the end of this. A couple of wording changes. So for example, this policy on teacher qualifications says that each teacher must have a valid Illinois professional educator license. And there was a suggestion that we add which the district will then validate. And also that an item be added. A question. It says we will ensure that parents or guardians of students in schools receiving Title I funds are notified of their right to request a classroom teacher's professional qualifications. And there was a question, how do we notify? We did put an answer to that here. A letter is sent to all families with students receiving interventions at our targeted assistance buildings each fall. That targeted building can change from year to year depending on the economically disadvantaged amount of families, and so depending on which school that is, that letter is sent to any students receiving those intervention services provided through that Title I funding. So then again, that was the question from an administrative perspective. I would tell you that legally we are required to validate everybody's professional educator license, so I wouldn't see that that phrase is needed, but open to do that if the board is interested in that.
Madam President?
Yes, Greg.
Reflecting on it, and thank you for that clarification, Dr. Bine, about the process. I understand the intent behind the suggestion. I think we could achieve the same thing and still be aligned with the current practice if we just said, instead with a complete, sorry, I'll rephrase that. To provide the district office with complete official transcripts, official being the
Oh,
operative.
in letter B?
Yeah, in 1B, provide the district office with complete official transcripts.
Doesn't that?
I mean, I think that it doesn't quite go after the validation, but I mean, if they're official, you know.
I think the way Laura, you explained last time, the official is the real, bad choice of words, but when it's official, it's the real one.
Yeah, it's not a photocopy. It comes straight from the university.
That's a good suggestion.
Okay, any other concerns on that one?
Let's just do that.
Okay. The next one, oh, I'm so afraid I'm going to get out of order here.
Sorry,
Uh,
Gina, I
no,
believe
sorry.
I have a question. 5-120 says that it was renamed and rewritten. Help me understand, were there changes to the rewrite or just the rename?
Let me look. The policy, this is from IASB. It is renamed because we have a new law, Faith's Law, and so that part, let me see if I can reference it in here, is added. It's rewritten to include Faith's Law instead of just Aaron's Law.
Because when you passed over it, I was like, wait, there's a, I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing as a call out.
No.
So it's just legal changes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Next one. Policy 5250, I'll also just reference for the board so that a reminder to you. 5250 is leaves of absence, and in this policy, it does ask for the board to answer some questions in the policy. The administration recommends to you what those answers to questions should be. So, for example, if you go all the way to page 5 of 7, the first question is, does the board require fully vaccinated employees to participate in a district COVID-19 testing program? We're suggesting the answer is no, because the answer is no. Okay? I think that might be the only required question on that one. It was. I just wanted to draw your attention that we also highlight for you when there's a question that has to be answered. Some of them aren't so cut and dry, and so it's something to look at when you review these. Otherwise, the next one is 5280, duties and qualifications. This is under our educational support personnel. This policy and footnotes were updated related to law changes, but there was a policy committee question. This policy includes bus drivers, and that all school bus drivers must have a valid school bus permit. We have to inform the Secretary of State if a bus driver permit holder has been called to active duty. New bus drivers who are returning from a lapse of employment are subject to requirements contained in Board Policy 530. And I think the question was, does the category of bus drivers belong here? Because in District 25, we kind of define educational support personnel as our admin assistants, right? Our employees, where our bus drivers are a contracted service. So the question was, do we need to have this here? We could go either way. I would say, however, even though their contract is a contract service, I do feel that if we were informed by a bus driver that they've been called to active duty, I would feel a responsibility of making sure we are reporting that, or that any bus drivers returning from a lapse in employment, that they are meeting our policy, they're going through the drug and alcohol testing, even though we have the contractor do that for us. So for me, I'm comfortable leaving it in, but I understand it's not exactly the same as other employees.
Madam President.
Yes, Judy.
Stacy, question. Contractually, in the contract, is there a contractual obligation that all employees of our busing transportation company comply with school policy?
Yes. Yes.
then you should leave it in.
Mike, just a clarification, because the other part of that was, should it remain in this section? Or should it be in a different policy?
Should we have a bus driver policy?
Whatever, something, because, going down that route, do we also, because we use, I believe we still use like taxi or some type of other services other than the bus drivers to move our students between buildings, right? And they're not bus drivers, if they're taxi driver, Uber drivers, I'm not sure, but should there then be a call out for those transportation service professionals, whatever we're gonna call them? I just wondering from a process, should we just, it's maybe policy point 1 and say, hey, this is specific to bus drivers or something?
Adding a question, what does press say? Do they have it with bus drivers right here?
Yes.
Okay, so I would go with Gina, just leave it right here.
Oh, sorry.
There's too many people.
Yeah.
Got it. It might be something to think about again, times change. So maybe if we have to have it's a question for legal. Has there been an expansion of bus drivers into other transportation where we're moving children around? And should the language here be student drivers instead of bus drivers?
So I can do that. I can get some input and bring it back with that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and just for future, you'll know that hopefully, for the sake of efficiency, something like this, we will have legal at policy committee meetings, so all this will be ironed out and not keep coming to the top.
The next one is on or it's off. This policy is updated in response to a 5-year review. Again, this is evaluation for our educational support personnel. You see the suggested changes from press. And then for a policy committee note, there was a suggestion to include in here a statement about aligning evaluation of our educational support personnel to the 21-25 strategic plan for all ESP evaluations.
Madam President?
Yes, Greg.
I appreciate the intent behind the suggestion. We're always want to be on top of accountability to the strategic plan. But I really see this as an operational concern. It's part of the implementation of the strategic plan. Otherwise, we could be inserting this in many other places. It's part of what we delegate to our superintendent. That said, if Dr. Bine and staff, maybe there's a place for it in the ESP handbook. But again, I appreciate the intent, but I think it's an operational consideration.
Any other comments?
I agree. Plus, it calls out specific dates, and now we're putting that in policy and then forcing ourselves to update it, so 2 reasons.
Look at the policies all the time.
Well,
Yeah, I agree with 2 of my colleagues not to have it.
Okay.
Just stick to the process, like my friend Gina's telling me.
Thank you. The next one is 6:15, school accountability. Again, this policy is updated from IASB in terms of the areas that are highlighted in red and in green. The areas highlighted in blue are from staff input. This one talks about using ISB's multiple measure index, which no longer exists, which is why we suggest taking that out. But there was policy committee questions. Should we include, for number 2, for example, continuously assess the district and each school's overall performance in terms of both academic success and equity? Should we include the phrase as reported in the Illinois School Report Card? And similar, sharing that on number 4, should that say prepare the Illinois School Report Card presented at a regular board meeting and disseminate it? And the suggestion for including that in number 2, since we're taking out the old multiple measure index and AMOs that some of us remember not so fondly, the question was, should we replace it with the school report card? From a staff recommendation, there's a lot of talk at the state level of those school report cards changing, and plus we feel strongly that our overall performance it needs to be reported to the board in more than just the Illinois School Report Card, that it's one component. So we didn't want to feel limited to that being a statement in policy, and as that report card changes, we have to come back and change the policy.
Madam President?
Yes, Gina.
The governance is assess the overall performance in academic success. That's the governance, that's the policy. The method in which we choose to do it is operational process.
Okay, thank you, Gina. I agree.
I agree.
Okay, so you can remove that.
Moving on.
Well, I think we can remove those 4 of us.
Okay. 6:130, program for gifted. This is just a policy that, press was saying is, always good to look and every 5 years or so review and monitor that. The policy committee notes, however, added at the end, there were questions about, and I'm not sure I captured this fully, so policy committee, I'll need you to chime in if I didn't. There were questions about the District 25 programs under this policy, meaning what is a program for the gifted. So what I've attached for the board are our related programs, both from going a range of from differentiated instruction, our advanced math and advanced language arts program. We also have a process for early entrance into kindergarten for gifted learners or early entrance into first grade. We also have a process when a family or a teacher requests to look at single subject acceleration. So maybe I have a 3rd grader, but I feel my 3rd grader should be in 4th grade math or 4th grade social studies. We have a process to assess that, as well as whole grade acceleration when we use the Iowa acceleration scale, which is the most commonly trusted scale as a part of determining should a student fully advance grades for all subject levels. So we have those in place when we talk about programs for the gifted. That's what, from a staff perspective, we're referencing.
So Dr. Vine, for this one, I'll chime in that, there's certain, at that point when we were doing that, we didn't have legal at the table. Their policy is supposed to be general and overarching. To go into specifics is not the place of policy. So I say leave it as is, do not include.
We're not suggesting adding that, are we?
No, the question, yeah, it was, no. The question was, and maybe to help Lori on this, we have this policy for the gifted, and then we have policy 6.135, accelerated placement program. So Lori, just as you referenced, some of the items that you identified are really attributable to this program. And so it was more of a general question of, okay, well, if accelerated program is about moving kids forward, early adoption into kindergarten, what are the programs that are specific toward the gifted? So it's not a policy question, it's just more of a, it's not a challenge to the policy, it's just, well, what's the difference what's the difference between the two? What programs are here for the gifted, and then what programs are here?
Yeah,
so
thank you.
That's the clarification that's needed.
Thank you.
And I mean, not a clarification. It's not. It's a question
Yeah.
versus a policy.
Question.
Yeah.
And the reality is, a student who's identified as gifted through our procedures could qualify in either of those. But a student who qualifies for advanced placement in language arts or math might not be considered gifted. So they overlap a bit. What? Yeah, I could look at that. I think, we can look at that and I can bring some thoughts back to the board.
That's one thought. Any other thoughts?
I actually like Gina's suggestion because one of our strategic objectives was looking at the whole student, right? And if we're separating two, maybe it makes sense to combine them and look at how do we advance that process without differentiating them like that.
Madam President?
Yes, Greg.
Now, this is a prime example of something that could go back to policy committee.
Okay, thank you. I want to, for the interest of time, Dr. Bine, I know this was I don't know, maybe I'm speaking prematurely, but how many more do we have to go?
Let's see. Yeah, there's just one more.
Okay.
Was that like where you were going?
Because,
yeah.
because
We're
in the
moving
future with our new
to-
process.
We are jumping now to 7:70, attendance and truancy. Again, policy is just updated due to legal references and to align with legal updates. Let me make sure I just pull the correct one in front of me. Here it is. So again, you'll see the green and red suggested by press, the blue areas suggested by staff. And the policy committee note, there was a suggestion to delete number 8 and number 15 because those specific items refer to students who are 17 years old or older. We don't have 17-year-old or older students in our district. It's really doesn't hurt if it stays, doesn't hurt if it goes.
Quick question, if we omit it now, is there a potential to have to look at it again because we differed from the?
Only if we have a 17-year-old.
No.
Right, from the press policy?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
so we
Are we
have.
constantly
yeah.
now going to be differing
So
from the press
because we
policy?
have Press Plus, so we pay more to be able to individualize our policies, whatever the board adopts, they put into our program.
Madam President, can I just get a quick point of clarification?
Yes.
For where we have our integrated schools, do we have, so Westgate as an example, right? Do we have older students? No.
No.
Okay. Not, okay.
Okay, so the guide, what are the guidance that we're giving, Dr. Bine?
Take them out or leave them?
Do you think that's okay, Dr. Bine?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. Really.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is it.
Wow, excellent. Thank you for the first reading of the policies. We are looking forward to our efficient processes with policy committee moving forward in the future. We will now move on to community input. Lana, do we have any input for the second reading? Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then,
Oh.
sorry, Iseka, I didn't see. If you
there
could
you
hand
go.
in your,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm glad you caught that, Craig.
I'm sorry about that, I came in late.
That's okay.
That's okay. Jen Burrell.
So first of all, thank you all for your service. After being here for even a shorter period of time, I realize how difficult this is for all of you. I'm here specifically to address the library policy agenda item. In discussing whether to allow parents to decide whether they can request that their children not check out specific materials, I have several concerns. So the first is giving staff yet another thing to keep track of. We saw that slide of how many hats the LMC staff wear, and that would be just giving them another one. It's a way of othering some students. I believe this was brought up by one of you as well. The third concern is there's already a mechanism in place to raise an objection to materials, and I can see, we discussed this too, that's been utilized already. And then the fourth, and this is a pretty grave concern, that these requests to not check out specific materials will evolve into requests like all materials about insert subject here. And that would also put additional and, in my opinion, unreasonable burdens on the staff. I definitely recognize this is a sensitive topic to a lot of parents, but I am going to quote the Cooperative Children's Book Center that, quote, "It's the responsibility of those parents and guardians to talk with their own children about what they do and don't want them reading," end quote. And I'm just going to end by saying through volunteering in the Windsor LMC during my son's designated weekly time, I've personally seen that the LMC staff is made up of professionals, and as such, they are best left to do their jobs, which includes selecting age-appropriate materials without undue interference or pressure from the community. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. If we have any other comments, if you can just give Lana your blue slip. Okay, we have Ilya Fishman and Nadia Freed.
Thank you, board. Thank you, Dr. Bine. Thank you, librarian. Thank you for allowing me to discuss this topic. So, as we know, children not read classical books as we did before. And I'm just concerned that as I see, I'm a doctor. As the children will grow up, I'm geriatric doctor, but I see younger patients. They become very confused and they're very neurotic. We look at the library with a FOIA request. There's a lot of toxic book in the library, a lot. And we look at the classical books. There's very few of them. Unfortunately, that ratio is favor toxic book. I just want to bring an example of gender confusion books, because gender confusion is very, very harmful. So we know from statistics that, and I email, 82% of the transgender people become very depressed and thinking about killing themselves, and 40% attempt suicide. Just an example, there's a book that is in the library called Living in Jazz, and that book is discussing about puberty blockers. Puberty blockers, as we know, is a treatment for prostate cancer. In that book, it says puberty blockers just take like a candy, and they don't discuss the side effects, which are, some of them are very serious, including loss of vision, and other side effects, I don't want to list, but many, many serious side effects, intracranial hypertension. If this book will be given by adults, side effects must be listed full. But for the children, we don't list the side effects, and we're kind of deceiving the book. So the book look like it's deceiving and dishonest. And this book, for example, is in the library. So I talk to many doctors. I show the book, show what it's in the book, and I talk about 100 professionals. I talk to the nurses, I talk to the CNA, I talk to the doctors, I talk to LGBT doctors, I talk to the pediatrician. 100% say, no, this book shouldn't belong to the library. This book should be removed from the library. And it's 100%, believe me, 100%. Still, we have a book in the library, and I see in this meeting, the removing of the book is a very complicated process, and it probably will not happen. So it's very, very sad, and that's why I wanted to discuss it in front of the board. This is really, we're doing this favor to the children. I see we transform today to tomorrow.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope for the best. I always believe in a goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you. Lana, do we have any more public comment blue sheets? No. Okay. Okay, we will move on. Thank you all for your public comments. We'll move on to future agenda items. Dr. Bine?
So coming up at the next meeting, the recapture levy abatement will be an action item for the board to vote on. Some other things are still waiting on dates to be applied, but in the attachment that the board always receives on general board meeting topics, I'll just remind you of some things that are coming up. Our audit report will happen likely at one of the February meetings. Let's see. 5-year financial projections, along with recommendations or ideas for the board to consider on long-term capital project funding will be at our January 24th meeting, so that is next week. And let's see.
Next month,
2 weeks? 2 weeks. Lana, can you remind me what else we had? Oh, we have some recognitions at the January 24th meeting. We have an update on our Director of Equities work in the school district at our January 24th meeting. We also have a presentation, a colleague of mine, Dr. Victoria Hansen, and I will be co-presenting a partnership that we'll be doing with District 88 in giving our teachers some partners in another district to experience teaching with and share ideas with. Lana, were there other things already? Okay, those are the big ones right now on the 24th. Of course, on the February meetings, probably both, we'll be talking further about library policy, legal updates. I would plan for the first February meeting would be my hope for that. And then open to any other topics the board would like us to consider.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bine. Any questions, comments?
Madam President, just a quick clarification. Not necessarily on the topics, but just, in some of these, for example, the student achievement assessment, how do you want, because sometimes we ask these in generalities, and I know because I asked for that particular one and I wasn't very concise, I kind of rambled on that particular piece, but how would you like if there are questions, just maybe as Greg did, I think Greg had submitted some topic, whether they be questions or, hey, can you cover this? How would you like those presented to you for these future questions, just, whether it be on the student achievement or ruler or even I don't think we'll have a lot of questions on the recapture levy topic, but, just so that as you are preparing for that agenda, that, we're addressing, you're going to address the things that, or the questions that may be there and maybe answer questions that we would have in preparation for it versus in the context of having to deal with questions as they come up during it.
Yeah, I would say the procedures that we've always had in place, an individual board member can always send questions, and we will make sure to either cover them in our presentation or we'll reply and make sure the whole board has that information prior if we feel it needs to be done prior to that.
Madam President?
Yes, Gina.
I would like to see on a future agenda space, I'd like to have a more robust conversation and understanding about our cybersecurity procedures and processes.
As far, okay, new topic?
Cybersecurity.
Okay. Thank you, Gina.
Sorry, Gina, just clarifying that, because the topic of cybersecurity, and then I'm just thinking of today in the policy meeting, in chapter 6, there's a whole section on internet access, things of that nature. So kind of relaying the two, or, cybersecurity as being separate as, what I would think of cybersecurity versus what the context of what we talked about earlier.
I don't know what I don't know to ask the questions right now, so I'd like to understand what do we have in place, what are our monitorings that we have in place. There have been questions to the security that have been raised.
Well, I think what he's saying is.
It is. It's
student access, not
right.
Hackers and our computers.
Well, I'd love to know
both?
if we've had any breaches, but take that aside for a moment because right. Right. But I do think from a policy perspective, I'd love for the policy committee to contemplate breaches. Sure. And what are we doing with breaches and notifications of breaches, communications, legal reviews of breaches, cyber insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
But again, I don't know what I don't know to ask better questions yet. So let's start broad and thanks.
Thank you. So I just, of course, Dr. Bynes added it to her list, but I just wanted to also kind of gauge interest. Are the other members of the board who would like to see that as a thumbs up? Okay. Okay, great. Any other new topics to add to the list? Okay, at this point, I am happy to entertain a motion to adjourn our board meeting January 10th.
Madam President, I move that we adjourn.
Okay, a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Chad. Good night, everybody. Thank you all for
All in favor?
All in favor? Good night.